Okay, here we go. The February 21st, 2024 meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Education will come to order. As is our practice, this meeting will be recorded. I warmly welcome our Youth Commission Liaison, Bethany Zhao, joining the board at the dais. Welcome, Bethany. The board provides remote access for members of the public and welcomes community members joining in person and remotely. The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill 2449, which enables remote participation by board members only under specific circumstances. Would Board Member Camacho like to speak at this time?
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
I'm going off of memory here, but I have been close exposure and am a little under the weather myself, but I wanted to be able to be here for this conversation. So I'm here in my home, and there is no one here with me over the age of 18. I think, is that?
Yeah, that is one of the things we want to confirm, and that does constitute just cause for remote participation pursuant to the 2449.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Hector. It's nice to see you online, if not here. Is there a motion to approve Board Member Camacho's remote attendance this evening?
Second.
There's a motion by Trustee Gerard and a second by Trustee Cannon. Sorry. Is there any further discussion? Okay, may I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Bonini.
Aye. The motion passes with a vote of 6-0, and the board has approved Board Member Camacho's remote attendance this evening. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreter, Teresa Mendeville, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask that all speakers be mindful of the Spanish interpretation and speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind all speakers who are wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. Welcome to County Attorney John Niblin, who is also joining us remotely for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, President Bonini.
And thank you for the guidance for the remote attendance. Okay, item 1B is the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second? Okay, a motion by Trustee Gerard, a second by Trustee Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? May I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro. Aye. Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Bonini.
Aye. The motion passes with a vote of 6-0, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Okay, item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on our SMCOE website and in our board docs, as well as on the table outside the boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreter, Ms. Mendeville, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment on topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education does not act upon any matter that has not been agendized, except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is a policy of the County Board to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when the speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. Once the hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Superintendent McGee, are there any members of the public attending remotely who wish to make a comment at this time?
I am not seeing any hands.
Okay, thank you. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. Superintendent McGee, are there any submitted cards?
No, we have no
Thank-
cards.
Okay, thank you. Public comment addressing specific agenda items will be heard immediately before the board takes them up. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific agenda item, please use the raised hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, submit a card in advance of the item. Okay, item 3A is the February 2024 Employee of the Month, Sonia Araujo, Administrative Assistant 1, Teacher and Administrator Development, Educational Services Division. Sonia, will you please join me in the middle of the room? It's always a fun thing to do. And so we have some words that have been shared about you. So here we go. Each month, the board and superintendent recognize an employee for providing outstanding service. For the month of February, we recognize you, Sonia Araujo, Administrative Assistant 1 in the Teacher and Administrator Development Department of the Educational Services Division since June 2022. When the Teacher and Administrator Development Department piloted the implementation of PandaDoc, the County Office of Education's new document management system, Sonia coordinated the effort, worked through several iterations to help improve flow, and provided valuable feedback that shaped the rollout. Sonia also leaned in to support the SELPA in the implementation of the Bridge Authorization Certification Program for Education Specialists. She managed registrations and logistics and handled troubleshooting for a series of professional development events serving 250 educators. Sonia's skills and attention to detail elevate the work of her department. She anticipates and ably addresses program needs and has worked to improve systems within the department. Sonia also continues to learn and improve her own practices. Sonia is a supportive and caring colleague. Whether the team is engaged in systems level conversations or setting up a room for a meeting, Sonia brings joy to the effort. She is a valued member of the Teacher and Administrative Development team, and due to her efforts, the team is in a better position to serve educators. We are proud of our County Office of Education staff and are pleased to recognize you, Sonia, for your outstanding work. Congratulations for being named Employee of the Month for February 2024. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you so much for your hard work. Very important. And this is for you. So it's an Apple Award and a little special gift there. There you go. All right. For item 4A, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 7th, 2024 regular board meeting as presented?
Move approval.
Thank you, Trustee Alvaro.
Second.
Thank you. There's second by Trustee Gerard. Let's see. Is there any further discussion? None. May I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro?
Aye.
Mr. Camacho?
Aye.
Mr. Cannon?
Aye.
Ms. Gerard?
Aye.
Mr. Torres?
Aye.
Ms. Benini?
Aye. The motion passes with a vote of 6-0, and the minutes for the February 7th, 2024 regular board meeting have been approved. Item 5 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business for separate discussion and action if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by trustee Gerard and a second by trustee Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? May I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Benini.
Aye. The motion passes with a vote of 6-0 and the consent agenda has been approved. Item 6A. For this item, Johanna Rasmussen, Chair and Commissioner of the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission, the JJDPC, and Melissa Wilson, former Commissioner, San Mateo County JJDPC, will provide a presentation from the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission at this time. Ms. Rasmussen and Ms. Wilson, please join us at the podium. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having us. And before we start, I sent forward 2 documents that you were supposed to get. One's called Barriers to Equal Access. Great, wonderful. So my name's Melissa Wilson. I am a former commissioner. I just left the commission, which I served on for 7 years. 6 of those 7 was as a member of the educational inspection team. I'm a former teacher and also instructional supervisor for Palo Alto Unified School District, which meant that I evaluated and coached other teachers in professionally. And I was also a reading teacher of students that are very similar to the students we have in juvenile hall. When I left teaching, one of the things I did was work as a coach. Whoops, we can go to the first slide. Thank you.
Oh, we have it here. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, how do we move the slides?
Is there
forward?
another click?
Oh, is
Is
it
it this
this?
one?
Hey,
Okay, thank
well, I'm pushing the forward button. Where do I point it towards? Thank you.
Melissa,
Yeah.
be sure to speak directly into that microphone
you.
so that people on Zoom can hear you
Wonderful.
easily.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Did that work or?
Oh, but Zach is arrived.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Go for it.
Okay, so good evening. I'll introduce myself while they're working out the tech issues. My name is Johanna Rasmussen, and I am the chair of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission. I'm also the mother of a former youth who was incarcerated at Hillcrest, and I work with about 30 youth currently in the community, kids who are up at the hall, and I'm also an educational rights holder for several of our incarcerated youth.
I didn't actually hear what you said to me. This should work now? Hey, okay,
Thank you so
wonderful.
much.
Going into this year's inspection, almost every member of the commission was either involved in the inspection process itself. We had a group of 6, which was our largest, or in a project related to education.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with our commission, we are a joint commission of a San Mateo County Delinquency Prevention Commission that's appointed by the Board of Supervisors and a Juvenile Justice Commission that is appointed by the courts. It's mandated in California that every county have a juvenile justice commission and a delinquency prevention commission. So our county uses the same folks to do both for both purposes. Our duties include, we are to inquire into the administration of justice. We coordinate countywide delinquency prevention efforts, and we conduct annual inspections of all juvenile detention facilities in the county. Which one, Melissa?
Projects right now.
This one here.
We've done a number of projects this year focused on education and in the past. The project that's ongoing right now is looking at the transitioning of youth from juvenile hall back to their communities. That's a critical issue. We also did this data project, which I'll be talking about. We created a diversion program for school exclusion and early arrest or arrest at the first time. And we've been engaged in many of these interests. In terms of inspection, we inspect the juvenile hall every year and we report the results of those inspections to various stakeholders. The inspection itself includes the educational program, and we'll be talking about the changes between going forward as a result of a change in the law. Educational program is described in section 1370 of Title 15. And we're not limited only to inspecting and evaluating Title 15 programs. We are able, as the public conscience in the best interest of children, to look at any area. Title I is an area of interest to me, and it describes many of the obligations of a court school. So in the past, the superintendent was required to submit to BSCC annually a document testifying that the program met all the requirements of Title 15. And now the superintendent is required to collaborate with a third-party evaluator. In this case, it was Santa Cruz County Office of Education. And I put the directions. The only thing that's changed is the highlighted section of the directions, which says that such a review cannot be delegated to another staff member and shall be done in conjunction with a qualified outside agency or individual. In terms of our role, nothing has changed. The education is part of the general inspection process. It happens annually. Everybody gets the project reports. I have to note that not everybody reads the project reports and we don't actually have impact, right? So if I mark something non-compliant, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just an expression of sort of the community conscience. I've tested that out many times over the years. We do use, and maybe it's confusing, we do use the same document that the third party review uses. That's provided by BSCC. We don't have to use that document, but it creates a nice parity. And it's allowed us to, the reason why education has always been broken out is because we're a specialist team. So we've always had commissioners who have either been teachers or assistant superintendents, et cetera, be part of the inspection process. Okay, got through many things there. Okay, so going into this year's inspection, I had a data project that I was looking at, and that was certainly on my mind. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the data project. This was a project I had asked San Mateo County Office of Education for 4 years to provide the MAP data, which is what they're using to evaluate whether students are making sufficient academic progress. And when that wasn't done on the year 5, I said, please give it to me. And thankfully they did. It's interesting. Title I does not requires that metric be captured. It doesn't require that metric be shared for court schools. So they're well within, the guidelines, but it doesn't help all of us who care about students' education be informed supporters of student learning. So the premise that I come to you with today, and this is perhaps the thesis tonight, is that understanding student data is the key to evaluating whether we are serving our students. And without that data, I can't feel confident saying yes or no. And that's what has brought us to here. So we had 2 data sets, a 3-year data set and a 5-year data set. And from the 3-year data set, we learned that there's a long-term student category. It's students who are enrolled in a detention facility for 90 days or more. And I think what's interesting about that number is that it's actually larger than I thought I might see. And so I want to tell you that there are children for whom this is their primary educational vehicle. They are not simply moving through, coming in, and then being released a few days later. They're there for long periods of time. With the data that I had, and it's not by looking at the number of times a student was tested, I came up with a median length of enrollment of 1.25 years. It's probably higher than that because the testing wasn't that consistent. The longest time I found a youth was 3.5 years of high school in the facility. So when you are looking at the LCAP, I want you to think about those students, because whereas other students come in and then leave, we actually have enough of an opportunity to both teach and then see whether we've been effective in teaching those students. Okay, the next piece of information is according to the MAP. Now, the MAP test is the metric that San Mateo County Office of Ed has chosen to use. It's a very good metric. It's highly validated. There's a lot of research on it. And it compares students to norms. And you can argue whether norms are fair to compare other students to, but it is a way to get at this, the truth of the question, which is how well are students advancing in their academics. So this is the average student is making 14 weeks of progress a year. The average student in America is making 52 weeks of progress in a year academically. Math is 3 weeks in a year. There's a breakdown, and what you'll see is, generally speaking, students enter at a 6th grade level unless they're English language learners with a special ed identification, in which case they're coming in at the 4th grade level, and they are actually making more progress than any other specific group. Having a breakdown, I think, is really important when you're starting to think about how do we know if we're providing adequate EL services or adequate special ed services. You have to know that. Graduates were also a group that I was really interested in understanding better. And what we found is that graduates really are coming in and leaving at approximately similar levels. Graduates are making 15 weeks of progress in reading. 13 weeks of progress in reading per year, and they're actually falling behind 13 weeks in math per year. So they're coming in at a lower school level than they entered. One of the things that, sort of at least is disturbing is to see the level at which students are graduating. And I was sitting in court earlier this year. It was an open court meeting, and the lawyer for a youth said, "Your Honor, this student was co-valedictorian and is functionally illiterate." And that should be very concerning. And that youth was in our system, is still here, but in our system for at least 3 years before he or she graduated. That is not to diminish the fact that these students have many, many challenges, and it's a very difficult task. But the fact that it's difficult doesn't make it not worth measuring at the very least. So the final findings from the report was that testing consistency has been poor. You're going to hear from your LCAP update that it's 11% and 12%. What I found was it was 53% for long-term students. The goal setting makes no sense in terms of how the MAP test is actually built. The MAP test, to go from 1st to 2nd grade, requires you to advance 16 points. And to go from 10th to 11th grade requires, I think, something like 2 points. So it only makes sense to have a student move forward 1 point if the child is performing at a 6th grade level or lower. If they're not advancing at a reasonable, a normal rate, let's say. So I would like to see the MAP test and other outcomes very specifically presented in the LCAP, the SPSA, with learner characteristics. And I know the numbers are small, but that's all the better reason to do it. Another thing, so I'm doing this project and I am seeing these and struggling with these results, which are pretty concerning. And so I started to dive into the literature, look at what's going on. And I found that there are issues that affect court schools frequently. And we did a data review, and these are the issues that are often problematic in court schools. We have issues with some of these. We don't have issues with others, but I want to call your attention to 3 areas. One is the length of the school day. So our students are getting 2/3 the instructional time, even though we exceed the minimum standards by a half hour per week. It's still, even though they go year round, it's still only 2/3 of the amount of time that a student gets in a regular public school. And we don't have homework, okay? So they're getting hours a week of instruction, and we're not giving these kids who are coming from behind even equivalent numbers of instructional hours to a regular student. And then we expect them to return to a school site and be fine. The second area, sorry. I'm going forward. Okay. Secondly, teaching methods. These students have tremendous needs and would benefit from teachers with high levels of subject matter expertise. And I'd like to see every class taught by a teacher with a subject matter authorization, which is possible for both multiple and single subject credential teachers in that area. And I'd also like to see direct instruction in all the areas that our school requires for graduation. So Edgenuity is not a great way to deliver education, in my opinion. There's not a lot of research there's research to support my opinion, not a lot of research to oppose that. Okay, finally, it's a lack of data. It's very difficult to assess progress despite Title I public transparency requirements. LCAP is issued as one document for all 4 schools, now 3 schools, but the student populations in Canyon Oaks, Gateway, and Hillcrest are very, very different populations, and they should be treated separately. The LCAP doesn't provide a breakdown by school or student subgroups for measurements of effectiveness data, such as SBAC scores, CAS scores, credit recovery, GPA, honor roll, core classes, reclassification of English language learners, high school dropout, high school graduation, college and career readiness indicators, and the student exit survey. It was very difficult for me to try to understand what was happening by reading the public documents. The school plan for student achievement is currently not posted online. And what happens here with data is very common according to the Youth Law Center, which came out with a publication this year called Out of Sight, Out of Mind, How California's Education Data and Accountability Systems Fail Youth in Juvenile Hall Courts. And another article came out from the National Center for Youth Law called Decoding Alternative Education, Student Demographics, Coursework, and Budgeting in the 5 largest California county offices of education and tools for transparency. And I will forward those to Chelsea if you'd like to read those. They're important pieces of literature that's come out.
Okay, so will you click for me?
Oh,
Melissa?
yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So now going into the 2023 inspection, as you can probably see, the difference between the Santa Cruz County inspection and ours is night and day. We really go into depth and we really care about what our kids are learning, what our kids are doing, and how they're progressing. So we want to point out the positives of the 2023 inspection, the positive climate. The kids are so enthusiastic about learning. Many of our long-term youth, it's the first time that they've really gone to school consistently gone to school, and they'll tell us, how excited they are about learning. So we're excited about giving them more than the minimum because these kids are just soaking this up and they really want more. Our Project Change program is spectacular. I think we have 7 students now who are doing community college online through Project Change. Our graduation requirements are equivalent to regular schools, and our school attendance has really improved significantly over the years. We used to have a lot of time where kids would spend in their cells versus in the classroom, and we've cut that down significantly. So those are some of the positive things that we found in the inspection.
So the 3 areas that I checked non-compliant, and this is a subjective decision. that I sort of have to sit and look at myself and say, what are you comfortable saying yes and no to? And in all of these, I could have, well, for the written policies and procedures, it's very clear on the form that if the policies and procedures are missing or in development, that's a no. And so I would argue that Santa Cruz County should not have given a pass to that. And because I have some historical knowledge, I know that I've asked for those same documents year after year and that they've always not existed. The second question is this a rigorous quality educational program that prepares students for high school graduation, career entry, and post-secondary education? It's very hard for me to figure out how to answer that question if I don't have any data. My guess is that that we are not providing our students with comparable school services, which is not required, but is one of the guiding principles of the federal government. When they talk about court schools, they say that court school students should have comparable opportunities as a student might find in regular school. There's no career in technical education. We don't have electives other than use of Edgenuity. There have to be multiple and appropriate measures by Title I of student progress, and there's no data that really gets to that. Or rather, there's data, but is it showing us what we need to know? And then the results of the study. The third question area I marked non-compliant, that was kind of a toss-up. It was parsing what does the words the course of study shall include but not be limited to courses required for graduation. And I checked it because I feel like if a course is required for education, for graduation, it should have a person teaching rather than a computer program teaching it. Edgenuity is really good at credit recovery. That's what the data says. The research says Edgenuity is a very good credit recovery program because you can progress. And the research also says that students who recover credits are much more likely to not reoffend. So that's great. And the research says that students who graduate from high school are much more likely to not reoffend. So that's great. But I'd like, we are not offering these students the same quality of, in my opinion, that we would expect from normal high school. There are many areas that I felt I could not address, and that's because I requested documents and did not receive documents. And I would like your support for future educational inspection teams, maybe have a point person, because so much work had to go into just getting some of the information. And I still can't stand here and tell you that I know anything about transitioning or educational planning or other means of correction, or whether EL students are getting enough support, or how the disability compliance is going. I asked for documentation on all those areas, and I was told that it was too cumbersome a request. And I don't think that's acceptable. That's not acceptable to me, because I care about what's happening, and I am the person that has been appointed by law to care. So let me do my job. Okay, so that's that on that. Okay, I've mentioned Edgenuity already, but Johanna's going to talk about the other three areas that are concerns.
So unfortunately, we've recently seen a drastic increase in gun-related crimes. And so what that means for all of us is that these guns are coming to school. There's going to be more expulsions, means more spots needed at Gateway. This is a trend that started about 6 months ago, and it's escalating quite rapidly. So that's something that we want to put on the radar for all of you, that we're probably going to need more funding and more resources at Gateway to meet that need. A disability compliance. This is something that I have personal experience with. My own daughter had an IEP when she was at Hillcrest, and I work with several youth who have IEPs who are at Hillcrest. We have a really hard time with kids who come in the spring, and I'm talking maybe May, and then we go into summertime and they miss that window for their IEP meeting. And then they get released at the end of August, and then I've got to try and get them re-enrolled in school. One child, it took me 6 months to get them re-enrolled in school. And that's me, Commissioner Rasmussen. How difficult. Imagine what it would have been like if he would have had a family and they were trying to navigate that system. So we have a real problem, and the problem is even more significant with out-of-county youth, kids who live in San Francisco or kids who live in Santa Clara. That's even more cumbersome. We also have a rise in children who are coming to us to the hall who are regional center clients, which means that they're developmentally disabled. They're so developmentally disabled that they're found to be incompetent. They cannot be held accountable for the crimes that they commit. But yet we're not holding IEP meetings. We're not identifying these youth as they first come in as needing extraordinary services, but they're there. And so we're missing that, those kids. And as far as classroom materials, funding for books and materials, our library, we don't have any magazine subscriptions. I'm in the San Francisco Juvenile Hall 3 times a week. They have a beautiful library and the kids want to read the magazines. So if we could just add additional funding, there's posters in the classroom that state Jerry Brown is the governor. I mean, we really need to give our kids, accurate information and have them be current with what's happening. So those are some areas of concern.
And so we have a few requests. For San Mateo County Office of Education, we'd like to see the curriculum broadened so that the students are getting services that are at least comparable to a regular high school. And we'd like to see data. And if the data does not demonstrate that educational gaps are not closing, but increasing, I would recommend a serious discussion around instructional time. The time in a court school is not only minimized by the law to the 4 hours, but you also have a lot of disruptions in and out with courtroom hearings, disciplinary problems, behavioral health issues. There's a lot of in and out going on in the classroom all the time. And then without tutoring or homework, and homework, I don't like homework. No teacher likes to grade homework, but homework is practice. And one of the things that's helping you practice is how to return to your home school where you will have to do homework. So I think homework's important. And I've read other court schools, LCAPs, and I can sort of tell what's happening in their programs. And we're unusual in that no homework is being offered or that nothing's happening on the unit that supports the educational process during the day. There was tutoring. It would be nice if the tutoring came back. The other thing is there's been a lot of changes in personnel at the County Office of Education, which is great, although I was really happy before as well. But the attendance at our meetings has fallen off, and I'd really like to be able to dialogue with more intensively. I guess not me, because I won't be there, but I'd like dialogue to be able to happen. And finally, it would be great to have, we're going to make another request for these documents, and it would be great to be able to get those documents this time. Of the Board of Education, I'd really like you to require that LCAPs and SPSAs are issued by site and that they discuss length of stay and learner populations. These 90+ day students are actually the best way we have. They're a proxy for all students. If we can figure out what their experience is like, we can feel more comfortable knowing about, intuiting what the experience is like of a student who comes in and then leaves quickly. Title I compliance should be at an issue that you should be thinking about and looking through. And also EL and disability student services. The Stanford Youth and Educational Law Project would be happy to provide guidance or work in those areas. And finally, the big message here is, yes, there are the minimum standards. Let's go beyond the minimum standards. So that's everything we have to say. Would you like to, we can take questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Does the board have any questions or comments? Trustee Alvaro.
Thank you. Thank you for this. And I know that your meetings are on Tuesdays, which is why, even though I get the invitations, I never come because I actually teach an adult ELL class exactly when you're meeting. So I'm sorry. I want to talk for just a second about homework. about 1,000 years ago. I joined this board in 94, which is about 1,000 years ago. And within a year or two, I was appointed to the commission as well, which I served for. Judge Diaz, I'll tell you, it was 12 years. It was actually 13.
juvenile justice.
Yeah, she played a little with the math, but so I was there for a while. So I know what you're talking about. I also tutored up at Juvenile Hall and I taught a class at Glenwood as a volunteer for a long time. So just to give you some background, that I want to talk about homework for a second. Homework was an ongoing battle, not with the school people, but with the GSs. Every time, which for anybody who doesn't know, that group supervisors are the probation people who are in charge of the students on the units. Every time we wanted to assign homework, the GSs would say no. I mean, because really think about doing homework with your own child. You got to be present for it, right? And so we understood that GSs weren't going to be present for 25 or 30 kids. We had a big population at the time. So that was an ongoing battle, and I'm not quite sure how we transcend that, because the kids honestly are not going to just go do homework on their own and bring it back the next morning and everything's going to be great. So the issue was never the teacher's willingness. It was always what happens after class. The same thing with, and we've gotten a lot better, but kids getting pulled out of school, an infraction on the unit, and they were out of school for 3 days. They weren't suspended from school. They were pulled by, I'm not pointing fingers. I mean, it was a long time ago. We've gone through a couple of chiefs since then. Things change. But those were the things we really ran into constantly. And I don't imagine with the homework that's changed. So I'm not quite sure. We did have after-school tutoring program for a while. There was a number of us volunteering, and we got some help from the interns at Notre Dame University, because they were educational interns. So we had some people, but that was a huge thing to run. And it took a couple of us a lot of hours just to keep it moving. And when we weren't able to do it anymore, it just sort of all fell apart. So that was a long way of getting to what's the answer with homework? What do we do?
Well, what I would do is I would probably create like a homework period. And so they're practicing, oh, what's your homework? Did you write it down? And still, it's basically still a class. I would put an instructor there who's teaching homework, but I would probably just make it an extension of the school day.
A sort of study hall thing.
It's a study hall, but we're going to call it homework, and we're going to try to build in some of the skills that are necessary when you return to school, like, do you know where to look to find your homework? Okay. And where do you write it down? And now how do you access what you wrote down? All these discrete skills that they actually need to have when they return. That's how I would, and you know what, I realized that the environment is so challenging, and you know, probation has been found, I think it was Brady was a lawsuit that probation's not responsible for the educational services. And yet we know that they have so much power in terms of where that body is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of frustrating, because it puts the full ownership onto the County Office of Education, but it's not fully their responsibility in practical terms.
Yeah, it's shared responsibility for the
Yeah.
kids because they're there in custody. And to be fair, some of the GSs were absolutely on board, and they were brilliant. They even showed up, they volunteered to show up at homework club because we had to have a GS on site, and they said, we'll come, you know, and it was they weren't even getting paid for it. They showed up. They were great, but it is a challenge. And if we were to add a homework period during school, that it takes away instructional time, or you lengthen the day, it's very complicated. And I'm not being argumentative. I just would love to be able to find some solutions.
Instructional time. That would not be.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Yeah.
But I would, and I know also that the kids, it's difficult for them to concentrate for long periods of time, which is an argument for a short day. Like this is a difficult issue, and caring people can be knowledgeable and know the population and disagree about how to solve these problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of these kids that I dealt with, and I can't imagine everything changes that much over a few years. They'd never been to school.
Right.
All right, that was part of the issue, was they didn't go to school. And when they were coming to us, I mean, they started making great strides, whether they were at Hillcrest or up at the boys' camp at Glenwood, which was even better because we had them there for a year and a half, 2 years. This was the first time they'd come to school. And so what for them, seeing success in school was because they were actually sitting in a chair, they're.
And they are so jazzed to be there. They are so excited. It is the best thing that's happening in their day every day.
Mhm.
And they're highly motivated. Still difficult, but very, very motivated. And it would be great to be able to meet them equally with programs equal to the desire that they have. And I do think, what's happening for those who have graduated, Project Change is really exciting. And one question I've had is, well, could we do something like a middle college, right? Where you're having more of the instruction provided by the community college.
I don't know. Thank you though for your
I
presentation.
just want to point out that our college students do work on homework. They have computers on the unit. They are actively working on homework. Even when I do my monthly visit, and they used to love to chat, and now they're like, Miss Johanna, I'm doing my homework. And so they are doing it. And so it's happening. It's just, how do we make it work for our high school kids too? Maybe we do that once a week on early day. I don't know what the specifics, I don't have the answer, but we certainly need to address that issue, because a lot of these kids struggle with executive functioning problems, right? So they need to learn these skills if they're going to be successful going back to school.
Thank you, both of you.
Okay, are there any more questions, comments? Oh, Hector, do you have your hand up? Yes, I see it, Hector, or Trustee Camacho.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the commissioners for bringing this presentation forward. I am a big proponent of data, and especially the kind of data that you're looking for. I think that's been a consistent theme, at least since I've joined the board, of kind of how we can look at data in a way that that seeks how to best educate our students, but also maintains privacy, which was another important factor in this conversation. I just appreciate you going in and doing this kind of analysis. Whenever there are questions raised by the public, especially a public agency like yours, I think it's incumbent upon our office to explore how do we address the questions that have come up from that. I would love to see how kind of the data that you all were looking at can be incorporated in this LCAP conversation. So I'm glad that that's where we're headed next. I would shy away from starting to talk about specific strategies and instructional practices, because that's outside of the purview of this board. Our board is more concerned with student outcomes. How we get there, I think, is for the professionals in the room to discuss. And so I leave that to Superintendent McGee and her team to figure those pieces out. But I do really appreciate you elevating the opportunity to look at this kind of data at this level of detail. And I would ask kind of in response down the line, not necessarily tonight, how, working with counsel's office, how we can incorporate data in a way that maintains the privacy restrictions that are in place, but that also sheds light on some of the areas that we can still improve upon. So finding how do we strike that balance, because I very much would love to see the kinds of data that you're talking about in a document like an LCAP, so long as it's within the limits that are provided by law.
Totally. And something that's nice or useful here is that the Juvenile Justice Commission, under Welfare and Institutions Code 827, does have access to student document, or to case file documents, which has been broadly interpreted to include educational documents. And so you also, I don't know what your restrictions are, but you have a group of people who can go and look and tell you what they're seeing.
Yeah, and I think from my vantage point as a school board member for this school, right? Because that is how I interpret my role here. While I find it very important to look at the data of the students that are there, I think in my role as a school board member, I need to see it over time and not just the particular students that are in there in this moment, because otherwise I would be way too involved as a school board member that I think it goes beyond what was intended as a school board member. So I think that's another one of those balances, right? Is someone looking at the level that you're talking about so that this board can then look at it from like this level and say, hey, it looks like this is what the trends are. How are we affecting those trends?
It would be helpful to have the SPSA kept online for previous years so that you could go back and look at previous years' documents. And right now, there's only the current year.
Well, I would just end with thank you again. I always appreciate the public entity keeping an eye out for our students. You all are absolutely right. This is a student population that is often overlooked by not only society but our direct community. How many folks in San Mateo County are talking about our incarcerated youth? Not enough. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Camacho. Are there any other questions, comments? Trustee Gerard.
First of all, I would also like to thank you for your report this evening. It was very thorough and in some instances very disturbing with what's happening or not up there. And I'm also concerned that we weren't providing the documents for whatever reason that you needed to really do a thorough job with what you were doing in your visits and in your investigation, for want of a better word.
We weren't allowed to come back for a second visit, which we asked for because the principal was not there the day we visited. And we didn't have an opportunity to do youth interviews, which are so critical. And we went to the probation department, made 3 requests to meet with the youth on unit, were denied. And we went back to the school and asked to come back for a second visit and were told that could not be accommodated.
The youth interviews could not be
Yes,
accommodated?
we did not interview any youth except for 2 youth who were at Camp Kemp while we were there.
Very interesting. One of the other questions that I had was, and I guess this is more out of curiosity, when you were saying that it took 6 months to get a student back into school, I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Why? And number 2, was that student out of school for those entire 6 months?
Yes, that student was out of school for the entire 6 months. So the student was a special education student who was deemed to be incompetent by the courts, regional center client who had a non-public school designation in their IEP. So we had to go, once they were placed with a relative in another county, we had to start over because we had the non-public school placement. So we had to convince that district to let him back into their district. And he had had no IEP over the summer because I was told by the principal that they don't have to follow the same timeline in the summer. So that meeting didn't take place. So that really set us back when school opened, when he was released in August. So yeah, he was out of school that whole time. So a lot of our most challenging cases, they do have non-public school designations. And so this is hard when they're released, and especially if they don't have parents or guardians to follow through, they sort of get lost. And so that's kind of the role I've been playing with these kids to try and get them into school.
Thank you.
Although her story is a little bit more extraordinary, this is happening to more normal, students with more normal educational histories as well. Anecdotally, but I'd like to see what actually is happening.
So would we. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I have a few.
President Benini, I
Yes.
think Trustee
Oh.
Camacho raised his hand again.
Okay, do you have another? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify kind of from a process perspective, where we're headed toward, because I'm sure the superintendent has seen this report and the presentation that's been made. I'm just curious if they've had time to kind of, process the information and provide something for us as well, either as in response or in an extended communication about it. I just don't want it to feel like here's this really big thing that raises a lot of questions and there's not really an opportunity for discussion about it at a later time. I'm just not sure what the next steps beyond this presentation are.
And that's a great question, and I'll let Nancy address that. But I just also wanted to let you know, I knew that what I was writing was not looking good. And I said to the school, you know, why don't we just engage more? And I don't have to write this in a report or for it to take this form. Let's have a dialogue over these issues. And that could also not be accommodated, which is how the piece of paper, which is fairly damning, came about, is we tried some other sort of sideline discussion approach, and that wasn't possible.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. And thank you for the question, Hector. I'd like to proceed with my questions. Then I do think we can talk about like what next steps would be. From my perspective, I'm a frequent attendee of the JJDPC meetings. And, you know, the first batch of this information that I saw was in early 2022, when I immediately requested that we see it as a board. Because in my opinion, even though we have a role as a board and the county office has a role of actually providing the education, and we're, you know, giving direction, hopefully, you know, with the proper information, I feel that the JJDPC is an essential partner. You're on the ground, you're in the hall, you're seeing things that even our staff is not seeing. And the entire, we're talking about the whole child. We need to know all of these things in order to make good decisions. As you know, leaders sitting here giving direction, we don't have the data. If we don't know what's going on, it's impossible to do that and to hold the system accountable, which is literally our job. And so I love seeing the positives, because I know there are good things happening. You know, one of the things that we heard about at our last meeting had to do with the you know, starting of some of the CTE programs, which we're excited to hear about how that's rolling out and what that looks like. But it's just really important that we have data. So I'm going to start my question, or my, you know, question with data. How, and maybe it's just a repeat of maybe some of the other questions, but there must be a way. And so one of the inquiries I have for future discussion is there must be a way for us to see more data, even though it's confidential. So how does that happen? What are the ways to do that? Because we can't see it through the SARC. We can't see it in the LCAP. We can't see it publicly, but we do, you know, we do have an ability to meet, you know, in places and spaces if we notice it properly, where we might be able to see that data. I've had that be the case when I was on even a district board, when it was sensitive information, we heard about it in closed session. Those aren't things we do naturally as a county board, but I'm not sure why we couldn't. So it's a question. Are there places where we could be more knowledgeable about this, in terms of maybe it's one of your recommendations was come to our meetings, right? There is a lot of valuable information shared from all the community partners and the commissioners doing the many, many projects. So I find it to be invaluable, but perhaps it's something like our board having a, you know, joint meeting with another body that understands these things. Maybe it's something with, you know, your sharing information back to the Board of Supervisors, and maybe they care. My interest is in getting the data, having the tools to make the decisions, and then trying to figure out what the solutions are, right? So that, you know, from our level, where we are giving the direction, you know, is there a way where we can advocate for more funding? Does it come from other places? We should be thinking about those types of things. So that's where I hope the discussion goes, in addition to, you know, making sure we're serving the students. Okay, so one of my questions, I have just a few distinct questions. One is, can you just clarify, I know you said it in your presentation, but and I know it was iterative in terms of what the process is. That's different in terms of the inspections. So JJDPC
No change.
is still doing the inspection.
Yeah.
You're still creating a report. You're still submitting it to the BSCC.
Yes.
What does the BSCC stand for again?
Board of State and Community Corrections.
Okay. And then there's another report that's always submitted, right? That's going to be now, and it has been currently done independently. Okay, I just wanted to be clear because I wasn't getting, and I think I had multiple conversations where like, we're still trying to figure out what the differences are. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then in terms of the different report, I know when I saw the second report and I saw how different it was and the variance in data gathering must have been different. And you've explained that a little bit, but is there anything else you can share with us that might, you know, for those who aren't like reading this every day like me, you know, like how, like
Yeah.
what do you think that is?
So, you know, I was not surprised at all by the Santa Cruz County report because they wrote down exactly what I was told in my meeting with them, which I always do a pre-meeting, then a visitation, and then a post-meeting. Then I submit the draft to the County Office of Education, make sure that what I've represented is accurate in their opinion, give them an opportunity for feedback, et cetera. So anyway, the first meeting was a very generous 3 hours with me. So a little bit of torture going on. And if I had just stopped there, they would have been identical reports. The difference is that for 17 years, I've been engaged with these youth and their education. And every year over the last 6 years that I've done educational inspection, every year I get a little bit more knowledge. And so this year, probably I was at my highest level of knowledge because the data project forced me to research other areas I had not come across.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. One of my other questions is, you know, we had our, what is it? The SARC, right? It was on our consent agenda a couple of meetings ago, and I pulled it off consent agenda just to bring it to the, obviously we're reading, you know, it's there, but just to say, what we're seeing here is exactly what we saw in your report, to be honest, with the misassignment of teachers and that's another question. I'm just going to pose it, you know, how does that happen? How do we fix that? How do we have that, seeing the data? We did have some data from your looking at the MAP reports and the other things, like a decline in math scores. That's like horrifying.
Well, and to be, you know, data is not perfect, and especially when you don't collect it consistently. So I'm not saying that the MAP data is the authoritative truth. I'm saying it
Understood.
should force the question.
Right. That we should, you know, is that a factor? Is it the teachers? Is it the course of instruction, which is under the purview of the board, to say, you know, this is how we, you know, this is the math that we're teaching or whatever. So anyway, so that's a concern, obviously, that you raised. And the other, the final thing I want to talk about is the special education aspect, which I'm always keenly looking at. And there were 2 points that that you raised in your report, which we've seen too. We know that there were an abnormal, maybe not abnormal is the right word, but excessive number of suspensions. There were reasons that were discussed around why that happened. It resulted, in my understanding, in us having another staff person or something like that because to be responsive. My concern is coupled with the lack of data that I have been, you know, provided with, or that you were given around like special education compliance and whether or not there are manifestation determination reviews being done. That would be important to know. Those are 2 data points that might be related, right? And that maybe they're not able to suspend. I know, you know, it's a unique environment, but in any case, so that came to my attention. And then the other thing is just, I'm just going to mention it and then I'm going to raise it later when we talk about our future discussions in terms of whether we are capturing students in the special education realm or in the need of basic, you know, skills realm when they come to us. Like it's this opportunity to serve them. And if they're reading at at a lower level, that's really suspicious in terms of whether or not they're literate, right? You were talking about the student who was functionally illiterate. I mean, maybe they can get by, but we need to be able to focus on that. It's not what we normally do. I've been told that more than once, right? That's not in our focus at this level. And to be honest, it's not in the focus at middle schools, in high schools, like they're not in the business of just like teaching reading, but some kids need that, right? And so I'm worried about that specifically. I'm worried about us making sure that we are giving the kids everything they need when they're with us, and that if it happens to be worthy of identification as a disability, that we know, right? And we don't say, well, we don't want to know, because then what do we do? Well, then we have to work with our districts, right? Or we have to use our resources or do all of that. So,
And I don't know that there's a problem with child find. I have no idea. I also would love to see, what does an IEP look like before the youth comes to us, while they're here, and then when they return to the home school? Are there discrepancies, and is there something provided here that doesn't get provided at the home schools in their IEP? Or are we stripping out elements of the IEP when the student arrives to us? I don't know, but there's a lot going on there, and we should understand that better.
okay, thank you.
I just want to point out that
Yes.
the majority of kids up there, I think our population last week, we're almost approaching 50. The majority have an IEP. The majority are special education students, and they also have mental health disabilities. So
Yeah. I can tell you for sure that fact is the reason why I sit here. I learned that like 8 years ago, and I was horrified, and I was like, what are we doing? And so this is the place, right, where we're supposed to be able to solve that in some way, whether it's our role or the county office's role. Like, it's not solve it in terms of, well, bigger picture, solve it like, why are we incarcerating students with disabilities? But, but how do we serve them when they're there? So thank you for sharing that. My last question is really, and it might be a later conversation, but I know you have your current project. I've listened a little bit to the formation of the transition project. And again, like, heartbreaking to hear like there isn't like this plan in place, but I've heard little pieces of things here and there, like how kids, are captured when they come back, how they're supported. And so can you tell us, in just because we've been on this topic for a while, but can you tell us in the really, quickly, like what that project is looking like, who your partners are, like what you need, because that's an important thing. And I don't know if you want to share any more about that.
So our focus was transitioning both in the institution with probations and also with the school. And we've done the probations. And what we found out was that probation's required to have a case management plan after 30 days of enrollment. And they have been having the youth fill out their case management plan in their own handwriting. So that's a problem. Haven't done anything with the school. I requested a sample. I just said, I'd like to see one IEP, one case management plan, one transition plan, not case management, but educational plan. And I didn't get that. I have an idea of what my ask will be via other people who are still on the commission for that project. I'd like to see it with probation. We actually got to look through all the case files for every youth that was there. There are not that many youth. It's easy to do. And that's why I can say sort of authoritatively, youth were filling out their own therapeutic plan.
So the project is ongoing. I'm leading the project now. And basically, as these situations come up with these children, it brings more questions. Then we add on. And so right now, one of the big problems we're facing is getting children back into school. And that's with Sequoia Union High School District. We're not talking about, I would say it comes up at least once a month. I get a call saying, I'm having difficulty getting this child back into school. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for sharing everything that you have. And I hope that we'll have more conversations and that we'll be able to find a way to get more data and to
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, before we move on, however, I wanted to ask if there's any public comment. We've moved our public comment to after our presentation. And so I've forgotten a couple items.
Not
Any-
seeing any hands
Not
raised.
seeing any hands. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, there is no action to take on this item. Okay, item 7A, Kevin Boltema, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, will share the SMCOE budget and local control and accountability plan, the LCAP development timeline. Deputy Superintendent Boltema.
Good evening, Board President Benini, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. We provided the outline in your board packet. Just a note, our budget timeline starts in January when the governor proposes his budget for the next fiscal year. Really, we spend most of January and February talking about if we have any layoffs as we prepare our staffing for the next fiscal year. We are not at this point bringing forward any layoffs by the March 15th deadline, which is not only for certificated now, but also for our classified staff as well. We really then work to get preliminary drafts of budgets by the end of March to our program managers. And that's a big focus for us because we really want our budget to be directed by the program and not having business direct the dollars themselves. So we really spend almost all of April and halfway through May working with our program managers to build their detailed budgets. We do have our board study session over the budget and LCAP in April. And the idea then is that we look at our draft of an LCAP around May 15th. That corresponds with the governor's May revise. So we're taking a look at any additional projections for revenue with better information. And you may have already heard things are not looking good in the current year. So things are expected to be worse as we get close to the May revise, not better. With really the goal is that and we do appreciate that we have 2 board meetings later in June. That gives us a little more time to take input, make adjustments, and get the budget as accurate as we possibly can so that we have our public hearings on June 12th, and then we bring this for board adoption on June 26th. So the timeline helps guide our work. There's lots of interaction that's occurring behind the scenes. These are just those check-in points for us to make sure we hit those timelines. So with that, I present that to the board.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? I don't have a question, but I do want to thank Superintendent McGee and staff for coordinating the budget study session. I believe, I don't know if you've shared it yet, but that it'll be coordinated with an LCAP discussion so that they are kind of tied together. So thank you for that. Seeing no board questions, are there any public comments? None. Okay. There is no action to take on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, for item 7B, Sarah Notch, Executive Director, Center for Access and Engagement, will provide information on the 2023-2024 LCAP mid-year review for the Corton Community Schools program. Executive Director Notch is joining us remotely this evening. She's there. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Benini, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. Thank you so much for accommodating my remote participation. I'm in Sacramento for the Advisory Commission on Special Education meeting this week. So happy to be joining you virtually. And may I please have screen share permission? Sorry, just one moment to get the presentation all queued up here for you. Or if it's better if someone else share it, I'm flexible, whatever would do the trick. There you go. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes, we see your
Okay.
screen. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so tonight I am bringing you our mid-year local control and accountability, or LCAP, plan update. I'm hoping that you had a chance to review the slides because they're very content heavy. And because of that, I would like to propose a slight adjustment to our usual presentation format. Instead of holding all questions and comments until the end, it might be more effective if we take them throughout the presentation, goal by goal, after I review the data. So we can give that a try. If you would prefer to do it the usual way, that's of course okay with me as well. But there is so much in the presentation that I want to provide options for you. So our flow tonight, we'll start with some framing and grounding. I'm going to review the components of the LCAP, share each goal and highlighted metrics under those goals, as well as reflections based on where we are in our mid-year progress and next steps. And then also attached to each goal, I'll share year-to-date budget information. So for our framing and grounding, this is our third year of this LCAP. We're going into a full rewrite, and a lot has happened in almost 3 years since this LCAP was written, including a deep dive in our school strategic planning last year. We've also had the Gateway Learning Series and now the Design Series, which have provided insight and inspiration to reimagine what's possible in providing supports to our students. And the improvement work that we've tackled this year through a whole child lens has also given us some really valuable information and a foundational beginning to what we know will realistically be a long process to get to a place of full implementation with sustainability. In improvement science takes 3 to 5 years. And it's been a little more than a semester since we have developed and began working on our school strategic plan goals. So I just start out with that introduction to illuminate that we know we have a lot of opportunity to expand and extend our practices, and that work is already underway. The LCAP development this year will be really closely aligned with our school program strategic plan goals to further build on what we've been able to develop in collaboration with our staff so far. So I'm sure you may be familiar with the components of the LCAP, but as a reminder, I have them here for your review. Our 4 goals are in the areas of academic, social emotional, college and career, and foster youth support. And as I shared in the agenda review, tonight's presentation will mainly focus on the description, metrics, current mid-year outcomes, and expenditures, along with our analysis of what may be indicated by the current status and then identified next steps. Our first goal is around cultivating effective and engaged learners through individualized, data-driven support and trauma-informed practices. I'll give you a moment to read the goal in its entirety before moving on to the highlighted metrics. So these metrics are all focused on the measurement of student learning. And the first 2 focus areas are MAP and MyPath assessment. Our target is 100% administration rate. You can see in the far right column, we are not on track to meet that desired outcome. We're also not on track to meet the SBAC desired outcomes in ELA or math. It's definitely not a trend that we want to continue. So I will share some of our takeaways and next steps in a subsequent slide. But before doing that, I wanted to move on to the next 4 metrics under goal 1. I'm trying to give you enough read time just in case. So if I'm going too fast, please let me know and I'll slow down. So the other metrics under goal 1, you can see in the first row that we're close, but not currently on track to meet our desired GPA outcome. We do have standards aligned materials in all of our core subject areas and are in the process of a science and social studies adoption this year. We've also met our professional development desired outcome, but have some work to do in the area of credit recovery. Pausing for a little bit more reading time. And so here are some of our reflections and next steps. Going back to the measurement metrics, we know we need to improve the consistency and fidelity of our assessment administration, and we have to strengthen our data review mechanisms. Our next steps in these areas are identifying portfolio-based and curriculum embedded assessments to replace MAP testing, closely monitor those testing practices with a lot of support and accountability measures, and then utilize that data in formalized PDSA cycles, which is plan, do, study, act cycles. By creating and implementing consistent orientation processes, we'll have structures in place that allow us to assess students as soon as they come in, and then use that to develop data-driven, individualized educational and intervention plans for those students. You'll see that captured in the next steps for the SBAC metrics. As we recognize that our current instruction and intervention is not resulting in demonstrated mastery. And with the inconsistent MAP and MyPath assessment administration, all we have right now to measure student learning is what happens in the classrooms. And that's a very important data point. But we recognize it can't be the only data point. One of the core principles in improvement science is we cannot improve at scale what we cannot measure. So by strengthening our systems for monitoring and adjusting in real time the implementation of our individualized intervention plans for students based on, again, real-time data review cycles, our expectation is that we will then see significantly improved student outcomes as a result. So moving on to the second set of metrics, we also recognize that the percentage of students with Ds and Fs is higher than it should be. So our plan is to create bi-monthly review systems that help us with progress monitoring students so we can identify those gaps in their support needs and intervene immediately to improve their performance. For our standards aligned materials metric, we know we have some work to do around the, again, consistency and fidelity of implementation with our curriculum, and taking on 2 adoptions for the fall will require a high level of support to our educators as they roll that out. So we'll need to carefully design a professional development plan that helps ensure the success in the transition to the new materials, as well as support our administrators with a classroom walkthrough tool to help identify instructional coaching focus areas. So similar to the work that we've done in our K-22 programs with our new Teach Town curriculum that we're using, really ensuring that we're providing exactly what's needed in order to make such a big shift. Developing that walkthrough tool is currently in progress. Our anticipated rollout is the fall. Another takeaway is we felt like the PD metric in the LCAP is too narrow. It was really just focusing on training people on MAP and MyPath, and we need to expand that. We'd like to expand that in the new LCAP rewrite. And then the last takeaway is that we recognize our students may not be recovering credits at a fast enough rate to help them be on track to graduate, which we think could be addressed through a credit recovery and acceleration plan for each student, along with rigorous D and F remediation that's driven by those bi-monthly data review cycles. And then before we go into any questions or comments, if you'd like to proceed that way, just wanted to give you current year-to-date spending around Goal 1. And I will pause to see if you'd like to address anything in Goal 1 before I move on to Goal 2.
Does the board have any questions about Goal 1 at this time?
Sorry, did you say not at this time?
I just asked the question.
Oh,
I can't see Hector if he has his hand. He's shaking his head no. Okay. I have one question. What is a walkthrough tool? What are you referring to?
That's a good question. So when our administrators are in classrooms, we want to provide them with a tool that they can use to look for high leverage evidence-based practices that are going to result in improved student outcomes through rigorous quality instruction. And being able to train them in that, and then also train the staff in those practices, we want to go into the classrooms and see through that tool what is happening and going really well, so we can leverage that, and what are some areas where we need to provide more support to the staff. Just it gives us a less subjective way of identifying coaching focus areas. So it's just an instrument that we can use to look for specific things.
Is it an audit of what's going on, or is it more of a coaching? You mentioned coaching just then. Is it more of a instructional coaching tool?
Yes, it's purely a coaching function. So it would allow us to, as we're developing our professional development plan and looking at our instructional practices, especially with the 2 new adoptions, we want to make sure that we're really hitting those high leverage practices. And it's much easier for administrators, and I think more effective if there's a consistent way that we're looking for things when we go into classrooms, so that we can really celebrate what's going well, and then again, identify those coaching areas so that we can ensure that we're providing the right types of support to our staff.
Okay. One other question I had is, did you say that the intent is to discontinue the MAP testing?
Yes, we think that there's other measurements that are more effective for our population and are going to provide us with in the moment real-time data in a different way. So we're looking at, we were looking at doing that as of January. We're not ready for that yet. And with the adoptions that we're taking on, we really want to look at the curriculum embedded assessments as well. So that's our goal for the fall.
Okay. Another question quickly. You mentioned the portfolios in that same vein of doing something different than MAP. And I recall that the 3-year plan for expelled students, that we gather the information from the districts and that we say what we're doing to support them, mentions those types of portfolios. Is that similar to what you're talking about?
It could be. Yes. I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways for our students to demonstrate what they know. And I mean, just having the experience of being part of the CTE work that happened over the last 3 weeks and seeing what they put together as a result of that gave me more information than I've had. I think it gives more information than looking at the MAP testing right now. It told me a lot. And so we want to make sure that we're really pulling in multiple sources, and then through those PDSA, the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles, testing out different change actions to see how our supports and instructional practices can result in improved student outcomes. So it's about getting kind of an array of measurement tools that can all tell us, different parts of a story, and when woven together can give us kind of a comprehensive picture of where students are and what they need.
Okay, thank you. One last question, apologies. When you talk about credit recovery and intervening right away, and is that like for credit recovery, I'll just focus on that. Is there a specific dedicated person doing that now?
We do have credit recovery support, but I think what we want to move to is reviewing how things are going more frequently. So we have a lot of kind of latent data right now where we have a plan for students and we run it through, a longer period of time than I think we need to, and then look back and then it's sometimes too late. So if we can help utilize or have data help us inform what we need to do to help support the students in being successful in all the ways that shows up, including credit recovery, I think that's going to give us a higher rate of credit accrual rather than kind of that latent look back sort of data.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions. see any others, so we can move on.
Okay. So LCAP Goal 2 addresses the social, emotional, and mental health supports that help students build resilience, self-efficacy, and self-regulation skills. This was written 3 years ago, so there's reference to the creation of the Therapeutic Day program that we ran last year, which didn't turn out to be a support that districts utilized. So wanted to just call that out since you see it there. That's the original language of the goal that was created 3 years ago. So for our highlighted metrics, for the first one, we are currently in the process of gathering our survey results. So I don't have anything yet to share other than where we are in implementation this year. Our parent involvement metric is around utilizing an app called Talking Points to communicate with families. Talking Points is wonderful in that it provides translation in every single language that we have represented in our school, across our school programs. And it's an easy and quick way to get group messages out or do individual messaging with families and make it really accessible for them in their home language. So we're currently meeting that desired outcome. We're also on track to meet the desired outcome of fewer than 15 suspensions from Gateway and 0 expulsions. And then in addition, our resource specialist, which is RSP, is having weekly goal setting and progress check-in meetings with students. So we are meeting the desired outcome of having students participate in weekly tracking of their social emotional goals. So our reflections and next steps, though we are on track for the desired outcomes in those areas, we still have reflections and wonderings and things that we want to do to improve for next steps. One of our wonderings is if there are other opportunities and data points that we can leverage to measure the first metric other than just a survey. So we're going to explore additional tools and additional ways to get that information. We also know that all of our families are registered in Talking Points and that we utilize it frequently, but we haven't measured the family's utilization and satisfaction with Talking Points as a communication tool. So we'd also like to look into that to make sure that it's working well for them. It's working really well for us, but there's the other side. And if the message isn't received in a way that's functional, we would want to fix that. We also recognize that we can improve our data systems around referral and interventions, especially around other means of correction as an alternative to suspensions. And while students haven't been expelled from Gateway, we're hopeful that the Gateway Design Series may result in additional recommendations for how to support a broader range of student needs so that we can continue to have the ability to serve with no expulsions any students who need our support. And then finally, while the students are closely monitored by our resource specialist and the team of support providers, we know that they aren't always able to articulate the contents and entitlements in their IEPs and 504 plans. So this provides us with an opportunity to deepen our self-determination and self-advocacy work. I would love to dive into student-led IEP and 504 meetings, collaborative goal development, because it's important that they know what they need, how to advocate for it, and how to access it. And then this is our year-to-date spending around Goal 2. So I'll pause to take any questions you may have around what I've shared for Goal 2.
Are there any questions from the board around goal number 2?
Madam President.
Yes.
So
Trustee
for
Camacho.
these FTEs, are they, I guess using the same term, duplicated? Like, so those 3 FTEs here are the same at 3 FTEs that were in Goal 1?
No.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Yeah. When some of it is shared, like you'll see there's a 1.8 administrative, the rest of it is captured somewhere else. But if it's a full 3, then it's different staff members. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I think we can move forward.
Okay. So our third goal centers on career exploration and awareness through career technical education, or CTE pathways. It also encompasses coordination with a lot of partners, community college district, industry partners. I'll just pause one moment to let you read it. And then for highlighted metrics, the first two are around daily attendance and chronic absenteeism. The numbers are for your review in the far right column. You'll see that we're only meeting the desired outcome target at Hillcrest. I'll give you a moment to look at the rates of the individual sites before I advance to the next slide. And then these, the first two metrics on this slide address dropout and graduation rates. We are meeting the desired outcome target for dropout metric, but we've fallen short of the graduation rate target. Regarding the course access metric, we're currently in the process of A through G course approvals, and we'll be on target to meet that desired outcome once that process is complete. So that's in progress. And then goal reflections and next steps. We know that our percentage rates are impacted by small enrollment numbers. And you may have seen on the last slide that the percentages include AWOL circumstances. So we have had students leave Kemp and Canyon Oaks. And with a small enrollment, if we have one student who's gone for a prolonged period of time, the numbers are significantly impacted. So it doesn't necessarily represent a complete picture. That said, we have an opportunity to improve and strengthen our attendance interventions through analyzing the trends at each site, as well as exploring an expansion of our flexible instructional models if indicated by a root cause analysis. So we want to get information, like really do a deep dive on what's impacting our attendance rates, and then how can we intervene to improve them. For the dropout and graduation rates, we know that not all of our students complete high school upon transitioning back to their districts, which indicates that we need to strengthen our transition planning, support, and monitoring to help prepare and ensure success when students leave our programs and return back to district. And then finally, as I shared in the previous slide, we're in the process of A through G course approval. We anticipate that all of our courses will be A through G approved by the 25-26 school year. So we're doing half of them in this cycle and then the second half in the next cycle. And then this is our year-to-date spending around goal 3. And I'll pause if there are any questions.
Are there any questions? Oh, Trustee Torres.
I just want to make sure that I read it correctly. So for mental health support, there's just one psychologist and one counselor?
Yes. So we have a 0.8 school psychologist and then a 1.0 mental health clinician.
Thank you.
But we also have a contract with an outside agency, Effective School Solutions.
Mhm.
Right, Sarah?
Yes, that's the mental health clinician.
I have a question around Gateway in particular on the, sorry, on the wrong slide, attendance and absenteeism boxes. I know that there's a difference this year, maybe starting last year, in the transportation and how the students are getting to the campus. And anecdotally, I have heard that the attendance has improved. So is this an improvement? Do you know that from these numbers, whether that's an improved number versus last year or the year before that?
I don't right now. I can look into that. I don't have the previous percentage rates with me right now, but I can look into that. And that is part of the process. So it's not just looking at where we are now, but looking back at kind of all of the iterations and the improvement or otherwise as we're doing our final report and then developing it in the rewrite.
Right.
I just
that's
don't have it
helpful.
tonight. My apologies.
No, it's okay. It's helpful just because it's a happenstance, right? Because the bus stopped running. So the schools have their own ways of getting students there now. And I just think that it'd be good to know if that's impactful. Or at least related.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the thing, right? Is the story behind the numbers is really what's important. I mean, the numbers are important. They give us indications. But that's kind of a theme in all the work that we're doing is the what and the why and the how and how do we really capitalize off of those positive interventions that are working.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is important because, for instance, what if that is impactful and then we're like, yay, our attendance is improved. And then the bus starts running again. And then we go back to, oh, it's really hard to get students because they have to get there independently. So Trustee Torres, did you have another question?
Yeah, piggybacking off of that is like the transportation question, a part of the survey.
I don't think so. I could go back and double check. The survey is really around like how students feel at school, and it's a more like social emotional focus to it. But we're always open to getting as much information as possible. So if there's other questions that we want to include or different surveys we want to send, we don't have a fantastic response rate, but I'll look into it and see if that's included on there.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay. So goal 4 is around the coordinated services and support that we as a county office provide to our districts for expelled and foster youth across San Mateo County. So our highlighted metrics, countywide, we had 4 expulsions last year. We've had 3 so far this year. So we're on track for the desired outcome target. For the second one, our goal for the Foster Youth Advisory or Executive Advisory Committee meetings, you'll hear it as EAC, is 40 attendees. We're currently seeing 20 to 24 at each of the meetings. And then the final metric is around increasing the attendance at foster youth trainings and symposium enrollment, which I'll share more on the next slide, but it is hard to measure as kind of an apples to apples comparison because we haven't had a symposium in the past 3 years. So part of the target for the outcome is including a percentage of increase in our symposium enrollment. So it's a little hard to kind of tease that out. For our reflections and next steps, we recognize and are thrilled that our countywide expulsion rates are so low. And we know that districts are utilizing a variety of supports and services as both preventative and responsive measures. So our next steps are we want to continue sharing resources through our student services meetings to keep that trend going. It's a great opportunity for resource sharing and best practices and highlighting what's working well and problem solving as a group. So we want to make sure we continue that. Regarding the EAC participation rate, the Executive Advisory Committee, districts are usually sending 1 representative to the meetings. So, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So we're wondering if a target of 40 is potentially too high. I don't know that we'll meet that given the participation trends right now with our districts. But to provide maximal support, we know that one of the reasons that districts are sending just 1 person is it's hard for multiple people to get away. It's hard to find subs, it's hard to provide coverage. And so if there are other people who do want to attend and want to get their resources and information, but aren't able to come to the in-person meetings, we want to explore virtual or hybrid meeting models to see if that would help increase participation. And then lastly, we have a very robust training series happening, but again, haven't held a symposium since 2021. Our training series is really well attended. So we want to ensure that we continue to offer topics that are aligned with what the districts need and are asking for and have interest in hearing about. And then before taking your questions for this one, I just want to note that there's no budget slide for this goal because all of the budgets for the support is housed in our Safe and Supportive Schools department. And that is what I have for you tonight.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on goal 4? Trustee Alvaro.
Thank you. I just had a question about the Foster Youth Executive Advisory Committee. I understand that you're saying districts can't send more than one person. I absolutely get that. But are there other people, or can there be other people included on this committee that are not district sent?
Do you mean other like community partners?
Community partners or people from the BHRS, or I don't know.
Oh,
who,
okay.
But I'm just saying, so is it just people from the districts who are on this advisory committee, or can it be a bigger pool of people?
I am speaking kind of on behalf of Executive Director McGrath right now, so I don't have a super robust
That's okay.
answer for you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you as my experience of being a district representative who went to those meetings when I was in San Bruno. It's a place for district staff to receive information about supporting homeless and foster youth in our county. So all of the requirements and different resources. And so it really is more of like trainings for the districts who are carrying that work out. But beyond that, I don't know that I can speak to what might be possible or what's been explored.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions? I have a couple of questions on this section. The first one is, you note that the expulsion rates are low. Is this data disaggregated by district in terms of, can you tell us if there are definitely outliers or if it's very low everywhere?
So last year, Jefferson Union had 1 expulsion, San Mateo Union had 2, and Sequoia Union had 1. The 3 this year have been from San Mateo Union so far this year.
Okay, great, thanks. And then one of the reasons or related, things on the reduced expulsions was utilizing substance abuse disorder interventions. And I just wanted to make a note about that there's a lot of data at the Behavioral Health Commission and within their Substance Abuse Disorder Committee, that there is a scarcity of these programs in our county for youth. So anything that we can do to bolster that, it caught my attention because of that. The youth tell us this, everyone tells us this, the JJDPC knows this. There aren't programs for substance abuse at the at Hillcrest. So anyway, that's just caught my attention. So is that something that those interventions are district-based or those county-based?
My understanding is that it's district-based. So districts when students have been expelled in the past for like possession of illegal substances, and I'm sorry that I want to give you information, but I also don't want to speak out of pocket since it's not my work. It's Mary McGrath's. But when they are alerted to a student who is struggling with substance abuse issues, they are utilizing what we have available for substance use disorder interventions. And I think they're seeing some success from that. So my understanding is that there have been a reduced number of drug-related mandatory expulsions, due in part, at least to what they've been able to provide as interventions to help address the issue.
Okay, thank you.
And I can confirm that we are supporting at Gateway and Hillcrest around substance use through our 2P program. We have curriculum and instruction. Carla Rodriguez is up there at least once a week or once every 2 weeks, working directly with students. So we do have resources through the county office for our school
Oh, that's-
students.
That's good to know. Okay. Is that, well, we can find out more about it later, but is it a class or is it a resource or what does that look like?
There's curriculum that we use and Carla's scheduled to go up and works with groups of students on particular days at particular times. And it's through our 2P tobacco use prevention education program. And the funding is directly targeted for substance use prevention.
Thank you. Trustee Gerard.
Are the students and Superintendent McGee, or I'm not sure who should answer this one, but are the students that are being expelled for drug use being incarcerated in our schools, or are they doing something else with them? And if so, what? Do we know?
I can't speak to the numbers in the districts, but you see how low the expulsion numbers are. I'm sure those expulsions are directly related to weapons. That's my assumption.
Not
And not,
drugs.
no.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board? Are there any comments from the public?
Hector has his.
Oh,
or
sorry.
Trustee
Hector.
Camacho
Hello.
has his hand up.
Hi, go ahead. Sorry. Heather.
Yeah, I don't know that mine are directly, so on the memo on this report, this mid-year report is specifically for extra COVID funds, or this is our regular mid-year report? Because the cover memo said something about COVID required.
It's
Am I
just a
looking at the
mid-year
wrong-
report. The COVID required reporting requirements have already sunset. So my apologies for including that in the
Okay.
memo. Yeah, so there's not a requirement to do that.
So
Right,
this is
just-
just a regular, this is just, thank you for that clarification. This is just a regular mid-year, because I wanted to make sure I was
Yes,
asking questions in the right context.
I appreciate that.
So I kind of answered my own question when I was looking at it, because my leading up through goals 1 through 3, I was thinking, I always think about how much of our LCAP goals can include outcomes post Gateway, post Hillcrest, post Canyon Oaks, because I've always wanted to see that as part of an LCAP goal, is what is transition back and what is that outcome longer term for the students that come through our system. So when I see LCAP goal 4, like that's not directly, it's not directly related to our students, but it is kind of a little bit outside of the day-to-day instructional program that we're doing. So is that something that we could do? Because I should have given you the context first. So I remember when we first moved to MAP, and we thought that MAP was going to be the thing that was going to help us really track progress, because our students were so, I don't know if it's the appropriate word, but transient, right? They're not necessarily with us for so long of a time. And now we're going to switch to another system, which I think is great, because you all have identified that MAP maybe doesn't work for us. But what is that longer thread? And I've always felt that the longer thread is, where are they when they came to us, and then what happens to them well beyond when they've left us? Because I feel like that's more of something that is a staying thing and would tell us a better story about how did we fill in that gap, because we do honestly want us temporarily, right? We would love for them to be in their home sites. So how do we incorporate that data into this LCAP, especially since we're about to enter into, or we've already entered into the process for our next 3-year LCAP?
Yeah, I think not having finalized the goals for the development of the new LCAP, but having been working in the improvement process for the past this school year, that's been a glaring need for us, is that we have an opportunity to really kind of shepherd the students through the process. I'm a special educator by background, so I think case management, right? I'm always thinking about how can we help set goals, measure the progress on those goals, and ensure appropriate transitions. And so that's one thing that we're looking at for next year is how do we boost that support and monitor post transition for a period of time to help with ensuring that students are getting the right supports in their districts. So I could see it potentially being a metric under a goal that we write for the LCAP of, somehow measuring either student success. And it's tricky because it has to be things that we can control, right? It has to be within our locus of control. So I think the measurement would be more about implementing our process and ensuring that we're following our process rather than being able to ensure that students are then doing well in a district where we don't have any kind of control over what's happening. So it's really within our sphere of influence, what can we do for that case management and transition process to help smooth the way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I hadn't thought about it in that approach of what's within our locus of control. As you say that, I also think about, so does that mean that some of the resources that are committed to whatever they're committed to now then go to that post SMCOE program support, right? Who's to say that SMCOE cannot be supporting once they've left the SMCOE program? And that's a bigger question, right? And we're definitely not going to answer that tonight. But it does make me think about things like that, because you're right. What's within our locus of control? And if it's not within it now, do we have the ability to influence once they've left our program? I wonder about that. One of the things that's been kind of sticking with me, and I think it's connected to the JJDPC presentation as well, is when we were talking about for goal 1, those the outcomes for MAP and how we weren't really meeting kind of the data that we were hoping to achieve in that sense. When then do we look at the specific reasons why we're not able to meet those numbers? My hunch is that it's because there is a privacy thing attached here, right? Like X student wasn't able to do it because of this reason. And I think this reason, I think that's the information that we should be looking at. And if it has to be in closed session, so be it. But I think this board wants to understand more why that gap exists there with very, very real reasons, because I think that helps for our planning, future forward thinking of like, if we've identified this is the reason why we're at 45% participation rate, what are we doing about that 55%? Or what do we need to know about that 55% that didn't participate?
And a lot of it is process-based, right? And I'm remembering Trustee Alvaro's comment about the probation connection, and while they're very valued and respected and appreciated partners, just one example of a process-based underlying kind of condition for why our rates are low at Hillcrest is we have an intake process for students. So when they first come to YSC, they stay in intake before going to the classrooms. And post-COVID, so for a while there was like a quarantine period, right, because of all the COVID protocols. Once that was lifted, what we've seen is that sometimes students are in intake for one day and then they go to the classrooms. Intake is where we have an opportunity to do orientation and intervention development and administer assessments. So some of it was that the place where they used to capture administration more frequently, still not frequently enough, changed because of structures. So we're looking at how can we plan for that and boost at Gateway and at Hillcrest and Kemp our kind of change our intake process to an orientation and intervention process to build those individualized plans.
Yeah, I would.
So one example.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful to have an example. And then I would encourage that again, for us to look deeper at those examples in whatever setting that has to be. I just think it'll help us as a board and a staff all over, like to the extent that the board helps in this. But if our task is to be a representative of the elected representatives of this school body, I just feel like we're not talking enough about what the reasons are specifically, and I understand why, but how can we do it in a way that respects everyone's role and everyone's privacy? Yeah, so thank you.
Of course.
Mr. Cannon.
So Sarah, I'm always, it always helps me to hear concrete examples of, so I can picture what's going on, like in a classroom or in a program. And there were so many discouraging numbers here for say mid-year. So I just want to pick on two, and I don't know if you're the person who can give me the details of this or not, but let me start with first of all, credit recovery. Those numbers were pretty poor for the fall. That was a fall semester. So
Yes.
I'm trying to think back on my own experience in working in schools. What happens? You have a goal in a program that people develop and are committed to, and then the goal is really, we're way below where we should be theoretically in the middle of the year. So I don't really want to ask you why that is as much as what makes us, what would assure me that we are going to make progress on this?
I
What's
appreciate your
being done
question.
that I can
Yeah.
grab onto?
This has been a year of tremendous learning for me. It's my first year overseeing court and community schools. And I casually say I'm a professional rock picker-upper, right? So I'm in the process of picking up all the rocks and turning them over and learning as much as I can and seeing what's underneath all of these things. So I too want to know the why behind it and what's happening, and is it something that a lot of the things that I think I've learned this year are issues that can be fixed if we have the right processes in place. And so to your specific question about credit recovery, I think my learning has been that we aren't participating in data reviews and plan adjustments frequently enough. And so that is one of my big goals for building systems for next year, of how are we gathering consistently multiple data points about student progress and needs and strengths that we can leverage, and then adjusting frequently, especially for our students at Hillcrest who are not long-term students. We have such short windows of time. So we have to be reviewing what we're doing and the efficacy of what we're doing on a more frequent basis. So that's one thing that I think is going to help change, my hope, help change those numbers significantly, is that, again, we can't improve at scale, but we cannot measure. And if we're measuring, but we're not talking about it and we're not making changes and adjustments, then we're not going to get different outcomes. So
Thank you, sir.
That's my hope. Of course.
And just follow up to say, I still don't have a handle on what's going to be done in this semester to get more students, enable more students to get credit recovery. Are there some things that are happening? Or you're still
Currently?
planning? Pardon me?
Happening currently?
Well, or what is going to happen in March? What's going to happen in April? What can I picture? Students sitting down
Yes.
with somebody to work on. I'm looking for an example that I can picture how we're going to do better in this.
Yes. Sorry, I apologize for misunderstanding your question. One of the things that we're doing right now is Lauren Sneed, our academic counselor, and we have TOSAs and other our school psychologists. We have a lot of different team members who are heavily involved in supporting students through credit recovery and kind of mapping out their plans. What I want to do, I can't build a system for next year if I don't know what's working now and what's not working now. And so one of my immediate goals is to have more frequent, like regular meetings with that team so I can understand where students are and what's working and what's not working. And I think kind of piloting that data review piece with kind of case studies of the students. Tell me about, don't give me overall picture. I mean, I want overall picture too, but I want to get down into the nitty gritty. This student, where is the student in their progress? What is impacting the ability to move through the credit recovery? And so by doing that deep dive into what's happening to help inform stronger systems that we can build and put into place for next year, we'll also be able to address what's happening now through that process. It won't be as strong as having a regular system in place that's more robust, but it's going to be a great start to help both now and inform things for future for the fall.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Trustee Alvaro.
Thank you. Push the button, it didn't stay on. I just had an overall question that I'm not expecting you're going to have an immediate answer, although that would be delightful if you did. When I'm
I'll do my
looking
best.
at the English language assessments, the standardized tests for English language arts, what I'm not hearing a discussion of is reading skills. And in all the years that I had anything to do with tutoring kids in Hillcrest and in Glenwood, the one thing that stood out for me was that they didn't have reading skills. Many of them were reading, I would say many of them, I would say most of them. And these were high school age kids we were working with, and most of them were reading at a 3rd and 4th grade level. And so there was basically no chance for them to be doing really well on English language arts. It's never going to happen. They weren't reading. And I would really like to hear some discussion, and I have some ideas that I could share with you at some other point, but I would really like to hear some discussion about reading remediation as part of working on their English language arts, because I think you can't have one without the other. I just don't think it's ever going to happen. So I'm not expecting an immediate answer from you, but I'm just throwing that out there. And I just have a couple of ideas from things I've been involved with. So we could talk about it at some point. But is reading something that you're talking about, that you're really working on there?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of complexities too with, we have multi-grade level classrooms. So that's another added factor of we have students across multiple grade levels of content and skill levels. And the way that we're providing our special education support, we're looking into that about how can we supplement and not supplant instruction. So investigating different service delivery models. I mean, it's definitely a discussion. You're right that I don't have an answer of how to address it yet, but can assure you that it is a topic of conversation and something that we are exploring as we look into all the different ways that we can expand our supports for students.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, I have a couple. I'll be quick. One thing I wanted to say is that, thank you, Susan, for raising that. I'm going to raise it again when we get to our agenda items for future, because I think it's really foundational to what we're talking about. I mean, reading, we passed a resolution about how we supporting students to learn to read, and we really haven't been focusing on reading, because it's not because I don't think we care about it. It's just because it's just not the way things are. We think about it as elementary school things and that's not what our teachers do. But in fact, all teachers need to know how to teach special education and they all need to know how to teach reading. So I look forward to talking about that more. The other thing I wanted to say is that returning to Mr. Cannon's questions and then my initial question about reading recovery, or not reading recovery, excuse me, credit recovery, and you know, whether that's staff-based, what that looks like. In past years, and I'm sure other board members know more than I do, but there were people designated to work on this with students, and I don't know what that data looks like and how it was, but I think it was more effective. And I appreciate trying to improve systems and do data discoveries and all of that, but I too want to understand like tomorrow how that's getting better and not next fall. And then my last comment is to Hector's, to Trustee Camacho's notes about, you know, how do we build in this data and to your comment, Sarah, about the, you know, what's in our locus of control and how do we frame what our goal is. I think that there is information out there from my conversations with other trustees in districts and high school districts and whatnot. They are following what students are doing. They care about the students coming back. They're transitioning them back. So we are not in control of that, but by goodness sake, we could say that our goal, I'm guessing, would be something like we're gathering that data, right? And we're looking at it and we're basing, you know, what we're doing off of that, or we're meeting with those districts, or we're getting presentations from them because they have the information. So those are my comments, and hopefully that helps like build that in a little bit more into the LCAP. But I do think that what I'm hearing is that we're looking for practical like things that are going to actually impact students tomorrow. And with that, I wanted to ask if there's any public comment first. See any? And we need to take a quick break so that we can do some personal issue things, restroom and such. So we're going to take a break at this time, and then we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Hi, I think I'm calling Frank, and I'm sorry I'm in a meeting, and that's why I didn't answer, and I'll try you again tomorrow. Thanks, bye.
Don't want to run out of gas and I don't want to stop. So I can go 61 miles, so I could be okay. And then we could go 22 is safe.
Yeah, I'm charging my car, so it's finished charging. So let me unplug it before I charge it.
Oh, because I didn't see it. I didn't know you were here. And then I saw you came, so I knew you were somewhere, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, no, I turned on last night because that's where the EV charging station's at. But it charges pretty quickly. But once it's done charging, if you leave it charged, it charges you extra.
Oh, okay.
I did.
These things are- But we're good now?
I think we're ready to reconvene. Where are we? All right, we're to item 8A. Kevin Boltema, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, will introduce Sheldon Chavon, Certified Public Accountant and partner with the firm of Chavon and Associates, LLP, who will present and comment on the 2022-23 fiscal audit report. Deputy Superintendent Boltema.
Good evening, and you've already mentioned Sheldon. So as Sheldon's coming up, I do want to thank Minette Monio and Marion Reyes. They were here in the audience earlier, and it's the daily work that they're largely responsible for that gave us this very clean audit. So I just want to kind of publicly acknowledge their efforts. And Minette is our lead person engaging with the auditor, so she gets all the information prepared and hopefully makes Sheldon's job as easy as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sheldon.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Board President Bonini and members of the board. Very glad to be here again. And good evening to Superintendent McGee. I am here to present the June 30, 2023 audit. I say this every presentation I do. It's a history lesson. We're going backwards. You're dealing with your current budgets, first interim, getting ready for second interim, and a lot of information coming your way. But here comes the auditor to tell you what happened in the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. And I'm happy to do so because, as Kevin told you, it actually was a clean audit, right? And so how did we get there? How did we get to a clean audit? And mind you, we're a firm where we typically work with our clients to avoid having findings in an audit. So we try to be preemptive in that. We offer a lot of training, and there's been quite a few new standards in the last few years that have impacted a lot of our clients. And since COVID, though, our findings rates have gone up quite a bit. We had one client this year in Sonoma County. We issued 9 findings. And that was with a lot of work and effort on our part trying to prevent that because they were a continuing client. Management turnover is a key there. So point being is that to have an audit that doesn't have findings means that typically you're going to see consistency in your management. You're going to see consistency in your board. So congratulations to Kevin and congratulations to you for maintaining consistency. Now, going back to the point of how we get to a good end result on the audit. And give me 1 second here. I was doing quite a bit of work. Let me find my notes. There they are. Thank you. So we start with the auditing standards, and the auditing standards that we follow include the generally accepted auditing standards in the United States of America. And then for any local government, you're going to have to follow generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And then when you spend $20 million or so in federal expenditures, federal money, you're going to be subject to the Uniform Guidance Single Audit Act, right? So that's where we're focusing in on those major federal programs and the 14 different compliance requirement areas related to those federal programs and testing those compliance areas. In addition to that, the Education Audit Appeals Panel for the State Controller's Office requires that we look at various state state compliance requirements under the Education Code. We are not technically required to look at every single ed code that exists. So they give us a list of about 30 that they want us to pay attention to. In general, we look at compliance overall when we do the audit, when we perform it and plan it, but we don't look outside uniform guidance. We don't look outside contract compliance sometimes. We don't look outside what the Education Audit Appeals Panel gives us unless we find a risk, right? So when we do our risk analysis, if something else comes up, then we'll dig in deeper. Now, with that being said, the objective of an audit is really to make sure that the financial statements included for that period, June 30, 2023, are free of material misstatement. Materiality, I've spoken about this before. It's a concept that involves a lot of judgment. We're given guidelines, we follow standards, but materiality is really an auditor concept, right? And so from that standpoint, we've, as an organization in terms of auditors and the boards that we follow and the governing boards that we follow in terms of who sets those standards, AICPA, what we're doing right now is redefining materiality. And it's become something where we're trying to guess, okay, guess what the public's looking at, guess what might be material to the public. And so we're taking into account significance, the qualitative portions of materiality. However, you still start with what the numbers are, and then you move from there. And so while it evolves, whether the definition and the concept of materiality evolves, it still really comes down to what the auditor's judgment is. So it's a key concept because what we're issuing and we're saying that is unmodified and quote unquote clean is based on a judgment call that follows standards, right? So we all follow those standards. Our peer reviewers review that. They say your quality controls look good. You pass or you don't as an audit firm. Now we've passed every single one as a firm since I've been around for 25 years doing this. So that's good. But the bottom line is free of material misstatement or not. And so we issued an unmodified opinion, which says that we believe the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Now, with that, we're doing that and issuing that opinion with a reasonable assurance. It's very important to note that because it's not 100%. It's a high level of confidence. It's about 90% confidence, but it's not absolute. One of the things we look for in an audit would be whether or not those financial statements are materially misstated due to errors. We also consider fraud when we're doing that. We definitely look for non-compliance, especially when you include the generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And of course, government auditing standards has included more recently abuse. So now we're looking for abuse. So if you have somebody that's a management personnel that has a credit card, we're going to be looking at that to see if there's any abuse of that credit card, misuse of public funds, right? Things of that nature. Inappropriate relationship with vendors, going to look at that, things of that nature. New standards this year in terms of governmental accounting standards. We had one called GASB 96. This had to do with your subscription-based information technology agreements. Did not have a significant nor material impact on the County Office of Education. So you got lucky. You would think a lot goes into finding out whether or not it's material, especially for a first-time implementation. This was a big standard to implement for a lot of local governments. And we thought it wasn't going to be that big of a deal until we got to it. GASB 87, the one about the leases, was the one we were worried about. And then all of a sudden, whoa, we got rear-ended by this new one that we like to call SBITAs, SBITAs, right? Subscription-based information technology agreements. So in essence, that standard makes you record an asset and a liability for any type of subscription that you might have that's significant and or material. Did not have an impact, as I said, for the county office. Keep in mind that the audit is a pretty long process, right? We start back in March. We actually start in February right now. We're doing it right now for the planning meetings, engagement acceptance, and organizing risk assessment, getting all that moving right now. And then it moves on through March, and that's phase one. right? Planning, risk assessment, internal controls documentation, right? Internal controls testing, walkthroughs, start to identify the compliance areas, update our audit programs, meet with clients. So that's happening now. That's phase one. Phase two, we take a little break in June or July, maybe, if we can get a couple weeks off. And then we get into phase two, which is the year-end substantive work and the final compliance work, right? So all that internal controls and risk assessment work that we do on phase one rolls us on into phase two. And so hopefully by phase two, we're looking at a nice clean phase one where we didn't have any exceptions or findings. So then we can move into phase two with a low risk assessment and really focus on providing value added services to our clients. Phase three is reporting. And then that's what we're doing now, that final reporting. And then there's a fourth phase that we've added recently. That's follow-up. So after we submit the report to you, you might read something after this meeting and I leave and you might see something that, oh, wait a minute, I should have asked about this. Well, follow up. All right, so we discussed, I do want to mention that the federal compliance area most commonly here is the special education grant because it's about $20 million every year. So I think a few years back, maybe 22, we had a different grant pop up that we had to test. And that's a pretty detailed risk assessment process to identify what a major program is for your federal grants. Okay, a couple notes. I did provide a letter, a management letter and a board letter with the audit. So a couple notes there. Significant financial statement disclosures would be cash and investments, pensions, of course. And keep in mind the pension liability, you're going to look, if you go back and look at the schedule in the very back of the report, there's a couple schedules back there that show you 9 years of information on your pension liability. So what you'll see with CalPERS is that 2020 was about 40 million. And then it dipped in 22 because of the interest rates, right? Good interest rates dipped. And then in 23, interest rates were bad and went up. The liability came back up. So it went from 40 million in 2020 and it tipped down to like 16 or 17, I believe, in 2021. 2021, and then 2022 it went to 16 or 17, and then 23 it went back up to 40. So that has to do with those the markets moving around. And what happened there is that they estimate what that interest returns are going to be on those CalPERS plans and the CalSTRS plans. And if those estimates come in above or short, that impacts that liability. And so you're going to see that fluctuation if you get back to those schedules. It's the required supplementary information schedule. Other significant disclosures include the capital assets and, of course, long-term liabilities. Pensions are a part of that. Again, summarizing the results, it's an unmodified opinion in the financial statements. We issue 4 different sets of opinion letters in there. The first one was unmodified on the financial statements. We have 3 other opinions in the back. One covers generally accepted governmental auditing standards. That doesn't actually have an opinion in it. It just says we don't issue an opinion on internal controls. Now, mind you, we can. And that doesn't mean we don't test internal controls. It just means we're not issuing an opinion on internal controls. The fact that we can now do it, it's called an integrated audit, is new, by the way. The other part of that, the other opinion, we do issue an opinion on the major federal programs, and then we do issue an opinion on the state compliance, or whether or not there's anything out of compliance. We did not have any uncorrected financial misstatements identified, right? So no uncorrected financial statements, financial statement misstatements. And we did not have any material corrected misstatements. So that's a pretty clean audit. You don't get much cleaner than that. No material weaknesses were noted in this audit. So that concludes my presentation. Hopefully I didn't talk too much. Feel free to ask any questions that you would like.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Cannon?
I'm not sure that it's important for me to understand this, but I did not get that stuff about subscription.
It's, well, that's why they pay me. So here we go. I have different opinions on this. But what I will say is this. QuickBooks, are you familiar with QuickBooks Online subscriptions?
Pardon me?
Are you familiar with Microsoft or QuickBooks, how you pay every month for those? So essentially what we're doing, instead of you just expensing that every time you pay it, we're now saying, well, you're going to be paying this for the next 3 years. You actually have an asset now. And you also have an obligation, so you have a liability. So now we're going to record those. And we're only going to record them in the government-wide financial statements. And keep in mind, in these financial statements, you have 2 different sets of financial statements. Not your fund, your general fund, you're not going to see this there. So your general fund is going to look exactly the same as it always has. You're not going to see Microsoft asset, Microsoft liability. But in your government-wide statement in that position, you're going to see a Microsoft asset and a Microsoft liability. And then we're going to take a portion of that payment that you actually make every month, and we're going to say some of it's interest. Not just software expense, it's interest, and some of it's principal. So that's what's happening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In my opinion, it's pretty ridiculous, but here we are. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't benefit a local government, especially a school district, in any way.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Are there any comments from the public? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, thank you very much
My
for
pleasure as
being
always.
here and for staying for a long while. And there is no action to take on this. Thank you for presenting to us.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. It's easy when it's clean.
Yeah, this is a short week.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So item 9A, Chris Shao, the Associate Superintendent, Educational Services Division, is unable to join us this evening. So Executive Director Notch will provide a report on the non-technical portion of the 2023-2024 Comprehensive School Safety Plans for the San Mateo County Office of Education Student Programs. Executive Director Notch.
Good evening, Board President Benini, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. I promise that this presentation is significantly shorter than my last one, but very important topic. So I wanted to make sure that we could bring you information. And sorry, there it is. Sorry, apologies. I was working on sharing my screen. Okay. Are you able to see that all right?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is the non-tactical portion of the 23-24 Comprehensive School Safety Plans, or CSSPs, for our student programs. The non-tactical portion is the public-facing part 1. And these are some of the requirement reminders. So all K-12 programs must have a comprehensive school safety plan. Some of the other requirements is that are that staff are trained, that it's developed by a school site council or a school safety committee or another such committee, that we evaluate and amend the plan annually to ensure that it's properly implemented, and that each school district or COE must annually notify the CDE by October 15th if we have any non-compliant aspects of our comprehensive school safety plan. Whoops, sorry. There we go. So this last year was our first year migrating to document tracking system, or DTS, or doc tracking. You'll hear it referred to in all 3 ways, for the CSSP template, which has been a great pivot for us. Our districts are utilizing DTS for LCAP and other compliance reports already. We're using it for LCAP and other compliance reports. So it allows for a flow of information from district offices to sites to district offices, and district offices to SMCOE. And having a consistent platform also ensures familiarity with plans during emergencies. It's a universal template. It's the know how to navigate it. And so that's really helpful to increase the fluency and accountability as well. And the really helpful aspect of a DTS is that it includes all of the required components. It's a very easy to use platform that ensures that we're hitting all of our compliance targets for what's required by Ed Code. And part 1 is non-tactical, that's for the public. Part 2 is tactical, and that's internal only. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you before taking any questions about the part 1 are the contents. So The box on the left is what's contained within the Comprehensive School Safety Plan Part 1, the public facing document. And then the second box on the right is what elements are included in the Part 2 tactical internal only portion of the plan. So I just wanted to ground you in the requirements and what is included in each section. And I will happily answer any questions that you might have about our Part 1 plans.
Are there any questions from the board? I just have one basic question. Yeah, Trustee Camacho doesn't have his hand up. Okay. Now that it's sort of online or whatever, it's accessible through the platform. How is it accessed like at a site? Is there something that's in hard copy, or if there is an actual emergency, like what does that look like in practical terms? I'm just curious.
Yes, there is a requirement to maintain a copy of the plan on site. But this online format, you know, if we need to access things and we have internet capability, depending on what emergency we're responding to, it's just another way for us to get the information. But yes, there is a maintenance of the record on the school site in hard copy version as well.
Great, good to know. Okay. I don't see any other comments. Are there any comments from the public? Oh, Mr. Cannon, did you have a?
Well, I just wanted to ask Sarah, is this basically, we're basically checking in on last year's plan, updating last year's plan?
This, it's the
It's public.
23-24 plan.
Yeah. So
And then
what I'm trying to get a feel for, I guess, is how many changes are involved? I mean, is it pretty much a solid document from last year that you're just looking over to be sure that, tell me if you would.
yes, it's very similar. The changes that were made are primarily to updating policy language and links in the Part 1 plan for the updated policies, as well as any staff changes. So we do that in the beginning of the year. So the plan that we had last year, we're able and required to go in and make updates if there are staff changes for the tactical Part 2 portions for incident command. But it's all based off of the same, like our Big 5 protocols and other protocols and supports that haven't changed. And so that's another lovely byproduct of moving to DTS, is that things that are still relevant roll over as we're writing the new plan, and it reduces the need for like duplicate data entry. So very minor non-substantive changes from last year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, any public comment? Don't see any. Okay, let's see, sorry. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the non-tactical portion of the 2023-2024 comprehensive school safety plans for San Mateo County Office of Education student programs?
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cannon, second by Salvaro. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oops, I forgot to ask if there was further discussion. Oh, yes, sorry, I can't say that. I have to follow the script, but no further discussion? Okay, may I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro?
Aye.
Mr. Camacho?
Aye.
Mr. Cannon?
Aye.
Ms. Gerard?
Aye.
Mr. Torres?
Aye.
Ms. Benini?
Aye. Motion passes with a vote of 6-0, and the non-tactical portion of the 2023-24 comprehensive school safety plans for the San Mateo County Office of Education student programs has been approved. For item 10A, the board will move to closed session to hear a report from Executive Director Notch presenting in place of Associate Superintendent Schaus on the tactical portion of the 2023-24 comprehensive school safety plans for the San Mateo County Office of Education student programs. Before we move to closed session, are there any comments from the public?
I have a question for maybe Mr. Niblin.
Okay,
Just wondering if our student liaison, Bethany, can remain in this closed session. I feel there's little risk or harm in that, and she gets to learn from experiencing a closed session. Just a question to Mr. Niblin.
Thank you. As long as the board president is okay with it, I think from a legal perspective, it's fine.
I'm okay with it.
Be okay staying?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Niblin.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just admonish that, closed session conversations, of course, are confidential and things that are discussed in closed session have to remain there. Kind of like Las Vegas.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we are going to take a pause and move into closed session. Looks like we're back online.
It wasn't the beginning.
Okay. All right, I think we're back. For item 11A, the board has returned to open session to report on actions taken in closed session. In closed session, the tactical portion of the 2023-24 Comprehensive School Safety Plans for the San Mateo County Office of Education Student Program was approved. Item 12A is superintendent comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments to share?
I do have a few, starting with wishing our school teams a wonderful week off this week as they enjoy their midwinter holiday, despite kind of quiet around here. And school resumes next week. I was up at Hillcrest last week to observe the CTE showcase where all the Hillcrest students presented their capstone projects from the 14-day CTE intercession. It was absolutely awesome and inspiring. And we will make sure that board members are able to attend the Gateway Showcase later in May. We should have the date for that already identified. So we'll get it on your calendars and you can get up there and see. This was our first experience with it. But the students responded amazingly well, and probation was a great partner. Things that you wouldn't really think about, where the students worked in groups at tables. They normally are not allowed to do that. The CTE instructors brought actually a U-Haul truck. They had so much maker stuff with them for all the different projects kids were doing. So there was materials all over the place, which is also not a normal site in the juvenile hall. But the kids made design shoes. They created business cards. They explored the purchase of a home and the purchase of a car in their financial literacy course. And I know they did lots of they actually designed a house with materials. And their presentations talked about sort of the growth mindset aspect of it, like what was hard about it, how did they keep going, what things did they learn and enjoy the most, what are they proud about, and they presented in front of their peers, and they had all of their materials on display. So it was phenomenal. It was a real hands-on learning experience for the students, and probation gave it like 10 thumbs up because there were very little behavior issues during the 14 days. Kids were so excited and engaged in the work that they were doing. So back to, it's not rocket science. If you give kids something interesting and engaging to do, they're going to go ahead and do that and not do other things. So that was a huge success, and we'll get you to the Gateway Showcase in May. I was really happy to celebrate Trustee Camacho's award that he was honored with last week through the James Irvine Foundation. It was a leadership award with an amazing array of people who are changing the world as other award winners. Your colleague, Trustee Camacho, among them. It was at a special reception in Sacramento for his work with Reach University. It gave me an opportunity to catch up with your old colleague, Joe Ross, who was the proud papa of the group for sure. Also joining the celebration was Trustee Lempert. So it was a little bit of Old Home Week, and Senator Becker was also present. It was really fun to be in the audience cheering on Trustee Camacho. I admit that while Mr. Ross was the papa, I felt like a proud, I'm just going to make myself an older sister. But that's how I felt, just very, very proud of Hector's work. Really, really meaningful transformational change going on. Something that I want the board to know about that's happened here recently is I think we've been going through a process to decide if we were going to change our financial systems. It's called the ERP system. We led a very rigorous process with a inclusive committee of 34 individuals representing many of the school districts. The process was led by our manager, our IT manager, Danya Uni. She actually managed to pull off an incredible feat. She got a unanimous agreement on the recommendation that we are going to be shifting away from CCEE system to Frontline, formerly Escape, over the next 2 years. It will be, there will be significant startup costs to this process, but it will be offset by other revenues. And in the long run, the product will be much less expensive to operate on a year-to-year basis. This will be a huge undertaking countywide because it impacts every single school district and their financial systems. But we have very capable and effective leadership under Deputy Superintendent Boltema to move us forward. Let's see if I can get through my last item, which is last week we learned that the Youth Climate Ambassadors Program is being honored by Sustainable San Mateo County as one of their sustainability awards. The event will be on April 10th. And that's about all I can do.
All right, thank you. Are you sure you're good? Okay, all right. All right, so for item 13A, the board will engage in a first reading of updated gamut policies. No action is required. These new or updated policies will come back to the board at its March 6, 2024 meeting for a second reading and action. Superintendent McGee, do you want to share any information about the policies? Yes. So the staff really did all of the work going through the policies. And we, as a policy committee, looked at went through the list as well. The ones that are on the chart right now, which I think we'll go through in detail. There's an update as to the status, and they're all recommended for approval, and the policy committee had a chance to weigh in on that. As we know from past reports, there is a cycle, there's quarterly updates. So it seems like, I think with Patricia Love sort of leading us through, thank you, Patricia, we have a good handle on it, but it's a big process. And so we're just taking it one quarter at a time, but they come quick. So anyway, if you can take a look, and then if there are any questions, I suppose we could address them, but we'll have the second reading next meeting. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, there's no action to take. Okay, for item 13B, the board will discuss and potentially act on providing input to the California School Boards Association on County Board of Education needs as CSBA forms a new representation structure for county boards of education. Board Member Gerard, would you like to start the discussion?
Well, yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you.
At our January 24th board meeting.
Oh, she needs you to move your mic closer. She needs you to move your mic closer to you.
Closer? At the January, well, it started with the January 10th board meeting when Trustee Alvaro suggested the board discuss how they would like to proceed with the situation regarding CSBA dissolving CCBE, which was the California County School Board Members Association. And I suggested that we write a letter, put all of our comments in writing and forward it to CSBA. At the board meeting on January 24th, it was decided that the board would submit comments and concerns directly to John Neblin, our county attorney, who would compile a draft letter. He did compile a draft letter and sent it to myself and President Benini to review. And we did decide to make some changes. And President Benini drafted a letter that I think all of the board has reviewed. Am I
Yeah, it's in
right?
the board packet.
Right. And we would like to get approval of this letter this evening to be sent to the CEO and Executive Director of CSBA, Vernon Billy. We had also discussed CCing it to several other people, and I would like to comment on that. I have been on numerous meetings, and I had told several county board members that we were putting this letter together, and to say that they are excited to see it is the understatement of the year. And I have had numerous emails and texts within the last few days wanting to know if we'd approved it yet. And in those discussions, I'm wondering, and I have not discussed this with President Benini, so I apologize for that. But I'm wondering if we can CC it, not only, well, it'll go to Vernon Billy, but to CC it not only to Albert Gonzalez, the new CSBA president, but also the entire CSBA executive board and board of directors. And I would also request that we send it to the 18 members that now compile Region 14, which is the former board of directors of CCBE. And what my thinking is behind this is, first of all, we know it gets into the board of directors' hands. And there have been issues with what the board of directors has been told in comparison to how CCBE board members feel. And it's like this far apart. So this way, if it goes directly to them, we also aren't relying on someone else to forward it to them or give it to them, or however we want to put that. Also, the county board members really would like to have a copy of the letter to disperse, in some cases to their own regions, and in other cases use it as a format for writing their own letters. So I think it's really important. It's an excellent, excellent letter. And everyone is very anxious to see it.
Thank you, Trustee Gerard. Are there any comments from the board? Any other comments? Trustee Alvaro?
Just that it is an excellent letter, and I want to thank you for your work on it, all of you. And I think it says what we need to say. It says it in a calm and precise manner, and it also says, look, which is good. That's a good thing to do. As far as sending it to, we have here the board president of each of the county boards of ed. So that's that. The transition work group members. So that's that group. But I think the idea of sending it to the the board of directors is also a good one.
Ultimately, the board of directors are the ones that are deciding our fate and everything. They were the ones that decided our fate for CCBE. And it's my understanding in the meetings that I have been attending that everything we put together will need to be approved or disapproved by them. And that's why I thought it was so important for each one of them to see this.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, sending it to more people is probably a good thing. And if it gets used as a format by other boards, good for them. You know, it's not the first time we've taken the lead on something that other counties have jumped in on. So it's a great letter. Thank you for doing it. And I would love to see it go out quickly.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, I heard that we're good with the CCs that we have. We want to add the executive board is different from the board of directors, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
and do we have lists of those
There,
people?
yes, there should be lists available.
Okay, and then also the new Region 14, which is officially after delegate assembly, it'll form, but we know who the members are.
It was the former board of directors for
Former.
CSBA. So that list,
Oh, former CC.
I mean, of CCBE, that list is who comprises now
Oh.
the Region 14 Board of Directors or whatever they want to call us. I don't even know what I just know Region 14.
Okay, I think that sounds fine. And I just wanted to assure Jennifer that we have lists and we will assist. We're not,
We
and
do.
it should be by email. So it shouldn't be terrible, but it will still be a lot of emails. So whether they can be batched or whatnot. And are there any other comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve? How did we say it? A motion to approve the letter, the
I move
comments from our
approval.
board?
Second.
Move approval.
Oh.
You can go ahead.
Motion by Susan Alvaro, second by trustee Torres, sorry, late. Are there any, forgot to ask if there were any public comments, but I don't think anybody's in the public. Okay. Are there any public comments? No? Okay. And there's motion, all right, although, we have a roll call vote. I got it. Okay. May we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro? Aye. Mr. Camacho?
Aye.
Mr. Cannon?
Aye.
Ms. Gerard?
Aye.
Mr. Torres?
Aye.
Ms. Benini?
Aye. Thank you. The motion passes with a vote of 6-0 and the board has voted to approve the letter to CSBA. Thank you. All right. Item 13C. The board will discuss topics for future board agendas. Would any board members like to discuss agenda topics? Trustee Alvaro.
Just, really like to thank you for putting together, having the JJDPC come, and I'd love to see it calendared each year so that they can come with their reports. Perhaps on a different night, we seem to have audit, LCAP update, safety plan presentation, and them all in one night, and it was a lot. But I would love to see them come every year because I think that's important.
Great. I think that's a great idea. Any other requests? Okay, I have a couple. One is what we've been chatting about tonight a little bit. I actually had reached out to Superintendent McGee in October to see if there was a way that we could start seeing more data around the reading levels and the things that we've been talking about a little bit tonight. And so my request is that I've sort of have an email that I sent, so I won't go into all the detail, but that we could possibly have an agenda item where we address some of these issues. We talk about what data we might be able to see and what some different strategies might be, and maybe potentially how that works into some of the new LCAP. And then my second request is just that can we try to calendar school visits during the spring to all the schools, but you know, the ones we haven't gone to more recently. So I would say I definitely, I think outdoor education has not had a visit in the last few years. So I would like that one, and then cycle through the ones we haven't seen more recently. Just, I think that would be a great idea. And then one other just little thing is, I know I haven't heard anything about the workforce housing committee or any work that's going on, but I think it'd be great to have an update if there is one, and maybe try to figure out if we can have enough information, or if we already do, to, you know, kind of do a press release or some information out to the public. Because I think it's a really exciting project. And whenever I go to a different space, no one knows about it because we haven't really talked about it, but I think it would be really great to talk about it. So those are my ideas. Okay, and then I think there's no action to take, just that. And then item 13E is board member comments. So why don't we start with Youth Liaison Zhao? Do you have any comments tonight?
I do, thank you. So to start off, in my role as the board liaison to the sustainability programs, I recently met with some people from the Office of Sustainability. So I got to learn more about what we're doing, and also discuss like the plan for me to help establish sustainability boards at different districts, likely starting within my own. So that'll be something coming up in addition to my reporting of what the county is doing sustainability wise. And last week, I attended the Civic Learning Summit in Sacramento. So that brought together a bunch of student leaders from counties all across California. And we discussed ideas for policy proposals and how schools could better support students. We were supposed to come up with 4 topics of interest. We started with, I think, over 40 or 50. So there was a lot of really diverse opinions. I think that really reflects how diverse people across California are and how youth bring different experiences to the table. But ultimately, we were able to decide on 4 final topics. So that was really inspiring to me because it really illustrated how we were able to collaborate and work together for what we think all youth could benefit from. The 4 topics were economics, sustainability, mental health, and literacy. Each group selected a speaker to present at the summit in front of school officials and legislators. I was selected as a speaker for the mental health group, and a lot of legislators were present. I actually met Assembly Member Berman, who listened to the presentation as well. So it's great to see how youth voices are so valued, which I really appreciate. So at the summit, I emphasized the importance of improving mental health resources, as well as advertising them to students so that they feel empowered to seek help when they need it. And overall, I illustrated and I highlighted how it was really important to listen to youth, because in these decisions that people make, it's oftentimes youth that will be impacted by them. And youth are the future of our community. So it's important that they are able to have some feedback and input on what future will look like. Thank you very much for the opportunity to attend the summit. It was a great opportunity to speak on something that I'm passionate about and connect with other student leaders.
That sounds amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
And thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Wow. It's very exciting. Trustee Camacho, would you like to share? Comment?
Sure, I'll start by saying thank you for letting me zoom in tonight, just out of abundance of caution. I just didn't want to get anyone sick after being on the road nonstop for quite a while. So I'm glad to be back home. This week, so Superintendent McGee mentioned, yes, last week was a lot, but I think the most exciting thing about that event was to learn about some other amazing work being done in California. That's probably the best part of that whole experience, is to meet other leaders throughout California who are doing work in juvenile justice reform. So it's a topic very near and dear to the hearts of the people in this room, to doing refugee family support, college access, and just a variety of topics that are very, very important to the work that we all do in our day-to-day lives. So thanks, Superintendent McGee, for joining us at that event, and Trustee Lempert, who was there in his role not only as a friend, but also as president of Children, as an advocate. And special thanks to Senator Becker's office, who was there in support and representing San Mateo County well. So San Mateo County was definitely in the house, and that was really great to see. Other than that, I'm looking forward to no travel for a little bit. So hopefully I'll be in person with you at our next meeting. Looking forward to that.
Great, thank you. Trustee Cannon?
Just wanted to congratulate Kevin and his staff. That was a great report. And I remember, when starting in on the board, that was one of our main concerns, responsibilities, was the budget. And it's great to see you doing such a terrific job with that, Kevin. Thank you. I want to thank Sarah for her reports tonight. And it sounds to me like there's a lot of work to be done. I'd be very interested in seeing some progress on all of that. Do you think there might be a way, Nancy, to get an interim in a couple of months to see how we're coming on some of that stuff? That'd be great. Hector, congratulations. And as soon as I saw this, I thought back to Gene Mullen and how he would not be surprised, but he would be very proud. Congratulations. And also thanks for the letter. Well done, strong, and at the same time professional and respectful. So that's great. Thanks.
Trustee Alvaro?
Thank you. Let me mute myself here. First of all, Bethany, you rock. That's just it. So we're done. Congratulations on another non-surprisingly wonderfully clean audit report. Your staff does incredible work. Certainly under your leadership, I know you give credit to them, and they work very, very hard. So thank them all. And I don't know if I can actually, no, I can't share my screen. That's okay. I was able to Zoom attend the event where Hector was getting the award for Reach University. And I just have to say, Mr. Camacho, I am so incredibly honored and proud to be your colleague and your friend. Not just the other night when you got the award, but all the time. You're just an amazing leader, and I just think you're wonderful. And I agree with Mr. Cannon. I had that thought too, that Gene, I remember when you first got on the board and we went to a CSBA event honoring Gene Mullen, and he sort of put his arm around you and he turned to me and he goes, "This kid doing okay on the board?" And of course he knew what the answer was, but he was so incredibly proud of you and your accomplishments. And so, yeah, I sort of thought of him the other night and thought, yeah, he'd be very proud. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gerard?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to jump right in with Mr. Camacho, except that I have a bone to pick because I didn't know anything about this until I saw it on Facebook. And I was not a happy camper, especially when I found out how many other people were there to help you celebrate. Like Ms. Alvaro, I'm super, super proud of you and very, very honored to be a colleague and friend. And feel like I had a little bit to do with something, at least, with you. And you've just been such an amazing person. Just not only with everything you do, you're just an amazing person. So congratulations. It's certainly well deserved. And next time I want to know, okay? Or you're going to get it.
It was to be fair, it was like the most secretive of secret things that I've ever had to do in my life. Like we were put on a
Well,
very tight embargo.
Congratulations. I had none. All I saw was on Facebook and I'm like, what is this? And then I see all these people that I knew that were there and I'm like, excuse me, what happened here? Bethany, I also want to say, congratulations and thank you to you. You really are doing an amazing job. You, young lady, are out and about and above and beyond, in so many different areas. And thank you so much for representing the students that you work with and that you go to school with and that are all part of your community so beautifully. You're absolutely right. People making decisions about students need to listen to students. And I have believed that forever. And so please keep singing that song because it's one that needs to be listened to. But thank you again for all you do. You just do an amazing job. Thank you. I knew somebody from Oceana would just be great. I just- And Mr. Baltima, thank you also for you and your team doing such an amazing job. It's always wonderful to have the auditor stand up and say, clean audit, this is easy to report. So that's super. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the board and President Benini and Mr. Neblin for this letter and passing it. And yeah, I feel like it's such an important thing. I'm sure you're all probably tired of me hearing about me talking about it. But when you're out there talking to other board members, they are so upset and feel really abandoned. And in the last 3 days, I've attended 6 Zoom meetings with different aspects of all of this transition going on. And I do want to remind everyone about the workshop in March 8th and 9th. And I know that Mr. Torres is coming, and of course I'll be there. And if anybody else feels so inclined, we really would like to see people come because it has not been advertised the way it should have been. And as of yesterday, there were only 35 people that had signed up. And that isn't even half of what was there last year. And it's because nobody knows about it. And also because people are very angry and because it's put on under the auspices of CSBA, they don't want to come. So, but it's important because it really is the county board members that have fought very hard to put it together because we had a lot of resistance from the CSBA staff on what they wanted to do. And we said, no, we're doing what we want to do. And today I had my first 2-hour meeting planning the conference in September for county board members. And that is also very, very important that it be a solid, good conference and well attended. And I'll be talking a lot more about that after the next meeting. So thank you. Oh, and I'm thrilled with that. The Juvenile Justice Commission was here this evening and gave us such a good report. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Torres.
Just echoing some of the same thank yous for the amazing people that we work with. Bethany, I'm really excited to hear what is coming next and coming our way. Trustee Camacho, congratulations. President Benini, that letter was so well written and amazing, so thank you. Also to the staff that's here, just because I know when we work late, they work later. So thank you. On March 23rd, I'll send an email out to everyone. It's the annual OYA conference, which is for our Latinx youth. And it's an annual conference that happens every year at Cañada College. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of music, food, and dancing, and a lot of great workshops, many of them student-led. So it's great to see our students in those roles. And that is all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just have a few short comments, mostly what everyone else has said, but I want to say it too. Congratulations, Hector. That's such an amazing award. And I too wish I could have, been there to celebrate. But I know I was there in spirit. I did see it like when Susan probably saw it if there was a link. And I want to thank all the staff, especially Sarah Sarah Notch for presenting a lot and also just answering a lot of our questions. So thank you. We look forward to learning more about all of that. I wanted to express appreciation for the JJDPC members for coming, because I think it's really important for for us to have that information. I appreciate that, there's interest in having that happen annually. And I want to especially thank Commissioner Wilson, because she's living out the county now and she's no longer on the commission, which is really a great loss for the commission, but I know she'll stay involved. But and then also thank you, or I guess congratulations to Kevin and your team. I know I just, little history. I got to work with the team when we did all the policies, and they're amazing, even though I know they're amazing already, but they're also kind of fun. But that's such a great accomplishment. So congratulations. And I think that is all for me. So item 13 is our adjournment. Our next regular meeting will take place on Wednesday, March 6th, 2024 at 7 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Hugo, did you say March 23rd for the OYA conference? Is that what you said?
Yes, but I'll
Okay.
make sure to send an email with the link to register and everything.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Feel better.
Thanks.